Chapter 628. P.S. This is yesterday's update, there will be more tonight. On the 3rd day of the 10th month, it was the appointed date for the duel between Mount Pai and Hanyuan School. Within the constellation Star Valley, within a month, dozens of tall and spacious buildings had been built one after another. Terraces, waterside pavilions, mountain pavilions, and winding bridges could be seen everywhere. More than 100 servants and maids, dressed in colorful clothes and holding pots and cups, shuttled back and forth between the flowing water and the rainbow corridors. Inside the building, people were singing and dancing, and the sound of stringed instruments could be heard. In the valley, there was a pond that was a few acres large, and half of it was covered with lotus leaves. On top of a lotus flower that was condensed from green smoke, there was a young girl in green clothes. Her skin was like a lotus, her lips were a little rouge, and her toes that were like white jade lightly touched the tip of the lotus flower. She danced there lightly and gracefully, and her movements were delicate and beautiful. She could be said to be peerlessly beautiful. However, the sect leaders sitting in the pavilions were not in the mood to enjoy the music and watch the dance. They were gathered together to discuss the battle. Someone asked, "Everyone, who do you think will win today's battle?" An elder from an aristocratic family stroked his beard and said, "That Taoist Master Zhang is an outsider with a shallow foundation. How could he have a foothold in Mount Shenwu? This old man thinks highly of Master Yong." Someone else said, "That's hard to say. The school of Hanyuan has been in our Shenwu mountain for 300 years. When Jinren Shin was still around, he was in charge of the celestial city. If this senior can do it, how do you know that Jinren Zhang can't?" The elder from before suddenly laughed and said, "Dao brother must be joking. If he really is someone like Jinren Shen, Jinren Yong would have long given up the celestial city upon seeing him. Would there still be a need to fight?" Sui School's sect master Sun Tong stood up and spread his arms, "Everyone, everyone. Hearing this one's words, Elder Ren is correct. Venerable Yong's cultivation is profound and his magical power is boundless. He often plans before taking action. If he didn't have a chance of victory, why would he be so ostentatious? This one believes that Venerable Yong's victory is already within his grasp in this battle of magical powers." Sun Tong was originally in high spirits. But as soon as he finished speaking, after waiting for a while, he realized that no one responded, so he laughed dryly and sat down awkwardly. He cursed inwardly, "In vain I spent so much effort to greet you." But he didn't even give him this little bit of face. How hateful. Sui Men was just a small sect with a dozen or so people, plus Sun Tong was born as a woodcutter in the mountains, nobody looked up to him. Therefore, his words did not carry much weight at all. Moreover, his words were suspected of flattery. Going up to him would be degrading their own status, so they ignored him. As they were talking, celestial music suddenly sounded in the sky. Looking up, they saw a cloud floating in the sky, carrying a large ship. For core formation cultivators wearing yellow robes were leading the way, and behind the ship were more than 30 mystic light realm cultivators in elegant clothes. The great elder of Mount Yi sect, Yong Fu, was sitting on the roof of the pavilion. Daoren, whose face was covered by his hair and beard, was sitting next to him. The two of them were talking and laughing. Around them, there were a dozen boys who were serving them with instruments in their hands. When the sect masters of the various sects saw this, their expressions changed. They didn't think that Mount Yi sect actually had two Yuanying enlightened masters. When a cultivator reached a higher realm, the people they befriended were mostly people with similar cultivation levels. Yong Fu was only one person, but the cultivators of Mount Shenwu knew that he had a wide circle of friends. As long as he paid the price, he would be able to find many people to help him. This was a great deterrent to the sects in the mountain boundary. On the other hand, after Zhang Yan arrived, some people had the thought of joining him. However, when they remembered that he was a cultivator from the outer seas, maybe one of them would leave like Shen Baishuang, so they gave up on the thought. The sect masters all went up to greet Yong Fu. After some small talk, the people of Mount Yi sect landed on the main seats in the north. Just as they sat down, someone said, Hanyuan sect is also here. Everyone turned to look and saw a cloud raft flying over from the northwest. Zhang Yan was wearing a black robe and sitting in the center. The Wang sisters stood behind him. Zhang Boyan stood on his left, a step behind him. Behind him were the three core formation cultivators, Chu Mu Ran, Daoist Wen, and Zhao Gu. Behind them were 7 or 8 cultivators led by 2 mystic light realm disciples. This time, they had brought more than half of the sect's strength. Someone exclaimed, "Is that enlightened Master Zhang?" The Daoist beside him seems to be a Yuanying enlightened master no matter how I look at it. When everyone saw the arrival of 2 Yuanying cultivators, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. Mount Shenwu was originally a place in the north of the Dongxing continent. It had always been remote, but this time, 4 Yuanying enlightened masters had appeared. How could they not be shocked? Yong Fu's gaze swept over Zhang Boyan a few times, and he was secretly shocked. He originally wanted to borrow Daoist Zhang's power to suppress Zhang Yan, but he didn't think that this opponent was not simple as well. There was actually a Yuanying enlightened master accompanying him. At this moment, Sun Tong, the head of Sui School, was trembling all over. He saw his son, Sun Xiucheng, standing among the Hanyuan sect disciples. When Sun Tong saw Sun Tong looking over and winking at him, Sun Tong was so angry that his vision turned black. If Mount Yi sect found out about this, then Sui School would not be able to escape responsibility no matter what. When Yong Fu saw that the cloud raft was close in the blink of an eye, he sat up, stepped on the astral wind, and took the initiative to go forward. Zhang Yan also got off the cloud raft and floated forward. Not long after, the two of them met on the field. After greeting each other, they first chatted for a while, then they got to the main topic. Yong Fu said, "Daoist Zhang, earlier I said that I would fight 3 rounds with you. However, you and I are the heads of the same sect, and it is not easy for us to cultivate to this stage. It would be beneath our dignity to fight barehanded, so why don't we change the method?" Zhang Yan said, "Then what does Daoist Zhang think?" Yong Fu stroked his beard, as if thinking for a while, then said, "How about this, you and I each choose a core formation disciple from our sect and bestow him with a magic treasure. We will fight each other with Daoist techniques, and whoever can last the longest will be the winner. What do you think, Daoist Zhang?" Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly. Yong Fu had put in a lot of thought. As spiritual master Yuanying, he had to kill a core formation disciple in front of all the heads of the Shenwu mountain. This was a test of propriety, and in this way, it would greatly weaken his advantage in cultivation. However, he did not care, and said with a smile, "The guest follows the host, we will do as Daoist Zhang says." Yong Fu bowed and returned to the building. After a while, his eldest disciple, Bai Jiaying, came out on a cloud of smoke and came in front of Zhang Yan. He bowed and said, "I am Bai Jiaying, greet spiritual master Zhang, I hope senior will show mercy later." Zhang Yan looked at him and saw smoke coming out of Bai Jiaying's mouth and nose. Obviously, he was trying to condense magic power and true seal. He should be a second-tier core formation cultivator, 1 level higher than Taoist Chu. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "What magic treasure do you have? Take it out first." Bai Jiaying bowed again and then retreated a few hundred feet. When he was far away, he waved his hand and threw out a 5-story golden pavilion that was shining with countless rays of light. After it spun in the air, it fell down and firmly protected his body. The people below exclaimed, "The Golden Palace Barrier." Someone else said, "So this is where spiritual master Yang's confidence comes from. With this magic treasure, spiritual master Zhang will be in trouble." This Golden Palace Barrier was a treasure borrowed from spiritual master Fang, a good friend of spiritual master Fang. It was a profound level weapon. When a cultivator hid inside it, it was like hiding inside a formation and was extremely difficult to break. Zhang Yan thought for a moment, then smiled slightly. He formed a sign with his hand and immediately gathered a drop of Xianming heavy water. Then, he gathered his spiritual power on it. After a while, he flicked his finger, and a drop of black water without any smoke or fire flew out. In an instant, it smashed on the treasure shield. Bai Jiaying saw that the water droplet was inconspicuous. He originally thought that Zhang Yan had only come up to test the water droplet and hadn't really made a move. Who would have thought that as soon as he collided with it, he suddenly heard a loud bang that shook his head to the point of dizziness, and when he looked again, he was dumbstruck. The Golden Palace treasure barrier had already transformed into a golden light and disappeared into the sky. Yong Fu was shocked. This situation clearly showed that after the magic treasure was damaged, it took the initiative to return to its owner's hand. What kind of method was this to be able to damage a profound-level weapon on the spot? Even if this treasure was only wielded by a core formation cultivator, it shouldn't have been defeated so quickly. Bai Jiaying stood there, not knowing what to do. After a while, he regained his wits and hurriedly returned to Yong Fu's side. He knelt down and said, "This disciple is incompetent. Honored master, please punish me." Yong Fu sighed softly and said, "It's not your fault. Master underestimated my opponent." Since Bai Jiaying was defeated, it was the turn of the Deep Abyss School's disciples. Because there were no core formation cultivators among the younger generation, only one of Chu, Wen, or Zhao could be chosen. After some discussion, Daoist Chu walked out and stood in front of Spiritual Master Yong. He said, "Please enlighten me, Spiritual Master Yong." Yong Fu thought for a while and suddenly said, "There's no need to fight this round. This seat admits defeat." He was very clear that Chu Mu had a protective magic treasure bestowed by Shen Baishuang. He felt that if he didn't go all out, he definitely wouldn't be able to defeat Chu Mu as quickly as Zhang Yan. In that case, it would be better to hold back and save his trump card for later. Zhang Yan raised his brows. This Yong Fu was quite decisive. He smiled and asked, "Spiritual Master Yong, how will the second round be conducted?" With a wave of Yong Fu's sleeve, 4 strong men walked out carrying 2 blocks of ice the size of millstones. The ice was as translucent as glass, pure and clear, showing no signs of melting under the scorching sun. What was even more strange was that sealed inside each block of ice was a fist-sized, sinister-looking insect with thorny hairs on its abdomen and back and armor-like limbs. He pointed and said, "This object is known as the frozen monolith stone embryo, unique to my Shinwu mountain. It was originally formed from the condensation of a nephrite bamboo shoot and the saliva of a divine bird, then buried under the cold ice for thousands of years. The strange insect inside is a pair of 1,000-year-old scorpion spiders. The second round will be on this creature. You and fellow Daoist will each use your transcendence energy to refine the ice plate without harming the scorpion spider in the slightest. Whoever releases the poisonous insect first and subdues it will be the winner of this round." The heads of the various sects below paled. The 1,000-year-old scorpion spiders were extremely ferocious. At their peak, they were poisonous insects that could fight a third-layer Yuanian cultivator. Although they had been sealed in ice for countless years and their strength must have been greatly reduced, they were still difficult to deal with once released. Moreover, there were 2 of them here. It was unknown whether Yong Fu and Zhang Yan could suppress them. Zhang Yan's expression changed when he heard the scorpion spider's name. He glanced at the ice plate and suddenly smiled, saying, "Fellow Daoist Yong, if you can give these 2 frozen monolith stone embryos to I'll consider it my loss." Chapter 629. Yong Fu was taken aback. A few thoughts flashed through his mind as he tried to guess what Zhang Yan's intentions were. Was the other party asking for this item because he didn't want to fight him or because the item had other uses? Yong Fu couldn't figure it out. But in his heart, he felt that he could make use of this to his advantage. Thinking up to this point, he waved his hand and smiled. "I can give this pair of icebound stone embryos to you, but I have a condition." Zhang Yan's expression didn't change. "Please speak, fellow Daoist." Yong Fu said, "In the next match, even if it ends in a draw, it will be counted as my Mount Amei sect's victory." Zhang Yan thought for a moment and nodded. "This is a reasonable suggestion. I agree." Hearing this, Yong-fu already knew that the other party was most likely here for the icebound stone embryos and not because he was afraid of fighting. However, the icebound stone embryos weren't anything rare in Mount Shinwu. The only difference was the insects, birds, and beasts that were sealed within them. For the other party to give up on a match for this item, could it be for the 2,000-year-old scorpion spiders? However, once these poisonous insects died, their vitality would leak out, leaving behind only a worthless body. He had never heard of any uses for them. Yong-fu secretly made up his mind. If he had the chance, he would definitely figure out the reason behind this. Snapping out of his thoughts, he glanced at Zhang Boyan and said to Zhang Yan, "I've met that fellow Daoist in the valley before. May I know how I should address him?" Zhang Yan said, "That's my residence's guest elder, Jinren." Yong-fu smiled. What a coincidence. The one behind me, enlightened Master Jiang, is also a guest elder of my Mount Amei sect. Zhang Yan understood what he meant and smiled. Enlightened Master Yong, do you want these two to fight in the next match? Yong-fu laughed and nodded. Enlightened Master Zhang's guess is correct. However, this is too boring. Why don't we set another rule? If the two of them are in danger, you and I can each lend a hand 3 times to prevent the match from being dragged out for too long. It would be within this Constellation Valley. The time limit is 2 hours. Whoever wins will be the winner. What does fellow Daoist think? Zhang Yan knew that the other party must have already discussed this idea. It was definitely not something the other party came up with on the spur of the moment. Especially when Kukuo was there to save him from danger. This added countless variables to the battle. When cultivators fought, even if it was a Dharma treasure or a Daoist technique, as long as he used it at the crucial moment, he might be able to turn the tide of the battle. However, he was well aware of Zhang Boyan's abilities and was extremely confident in him. Thus, he only needed to think for a moment before agreeing. Yong-fu bowed to him and left. Zhang Yan turned his head and said to Zhang Boyan, "This time, I'll have to trouble Zhang Zhang to go up and fight." Zhang Boyan laughed eerily and said, "Ever since the sword duel, I haven't fought with anyone in a long time. I didn't expect someone to come knocking on my door." Yong-fu returned to the back and whispered a few words to the Daoist surnamed Jiang. The latter nodded and flew out with the wind. He said loudly, "I am Jiang Ziqing. I've come to experience Zhang Zhang's brilliance." Zhang Boyan let out a cold shout and also leaped into the air. He stopped in front of the Daoist surnamed Jiang. The two of them bowed to each other and retreated far away. When Zhang Boyan saw that the distance between the two of them was about 300 feet, he shook his body and black smoke gushed out from his 7 orifices. In an instant, the surrounding several li became filled with cold wind and the sky became dark and gloomy. The Daoist surnamed Zhang's heart trembled. He thought to himself, could this person be a disciple of the heretical sects? It won't be easy to get close to him. The cultivation sects of the Dongxing continent were divided into the heretical sections. The heretical sects had strange methods and often didn't act according to common sense. Before he could see through the opponent's methods, he didn't want to rashly take on the attack out of caution and retreated a little further. Zhang Boyan took advantage of the fact that the demonic smoke blocked his opponent's vision. He raised his hand and pointed. With a crack, a bolt of yin lightning fell from above. The Daoist surnamed Zhang's reaction was also extremely fast. The protective treasure on his body flashed and blocked the lightning chi. However, his body also paused because of this. Zhang Boyan immediately took advantage of this opportunity. He raised one hand and made a hand sign. The strong cloud above his head shook. The cold crystal white bone sword, the yin-yang bracelet, the stifling breath nail and the dove's face tablet all flew out in one go. At the same time, his other hand struck down unceasingly with yin thunder, entangling the opponent on the same spot. The Daoist surnamed Jiang originally wanted to defend and then find an opportunity to counterattack. However, when he saw this scene, his expression changed. He hurriedly threw out an ingot from his sleeve and set up a golden auspicious light to protect his entire body. However, there were 4 magic treasures on the opposite side, so this kind of defense was slightly weak. The light was shattered into pieces with a bang, and even the protective treasure light collapsed together. He couldn't help but feel suffocated. However, this action delayed the 4 treasures for a moment. At this critical moment, he suddenly took a deep breath and pulled his body up. He immediately turned into a long rainbow and flew away. His speed was as fast as lightning. Zhang Boyan sneered. His shoulders shook slightly and his body suddenly turned into a rolling yellow smoke. He soared into the sky and chased after him. Zhang Yan looked at the Taoist surnamed Zhang's actions and raised his eyebrows. Only now did he know why Yong Fu said a draw would be a win. So he was waiting here. In a battle between 2 Yuanying cultivators, if one side was skilled in the art of escape, then he could advance and retreat at will. Even if he didn't fight with his opponent, he could still maintain a stalemate. The Taoist surnamed Jiang was a person who was skilled in escape. If Zhang Boyan couldn't catch up, then even if the 2 of them didn't fight from the beginning to the end of the 3rd round, the Yi Mountain sect would still win. At this time, Yong Fu saw the 2 of them fly into the sky. He waved his sleeve and threw out a shuttle boat. He then stepped on it and conjured a spell with his hand. With a loud sound, he broke through the sky and chased after them. Zhang Yan's expression was calm. He stood in the same place without moving. Taoist Chu couldn't help but feel anxious. He said, "Why didn't the chief help Shinran?" Beside him, Taoist Wen pondered and said, "I'm afraid that senior brother Zhang's escape technique is not as good as those 2. He won't be able to catch up." Taoist Chu felt that it made sense. He suddenly remembered something and turned to stare at Taoist Wen. "Junior brother, don't you have the sea-traversing flying shuttle given to you by your master? Did you bring it with you today?" Taoist Wen slapped his forehead and said, "That's right. How could I have forgotten about it?" He rummaged around in his sleeve for a while and finally took out a talisman. Priest Chu took it and hurriedly came to Zhang Yan. He handed it over with both hands and said, "Manor Master, this is the flying escape magic tool that Teacher Shin gave me in the past. It can help Manor Master catch up to those 3 people." Zhang Yan took a look and said with a smile, "Thank you for your good intentions, junior brother. Fellow Taoist Zhang rarely loses a battle with others. In the current situation, there is no need for me to intervene. Junior brother can rest assured." Taoist Chu was still worried. But if Yong Fu plays some sneaky tricks, it will be hard to guard against. Zhang Yan looked up at the sky and said calmly, "When the time comes, I will do it." The Taoist surnamed Jiang flew ahead. After a few miles, he looked back and couldn't help but be shocked. He had planned to shake off his opponent, but not only did Uncle Zhang not do as he had expected, he was still following closely behind. It seemed like it wouldn't take long for him to catch up. His escape technique was called Rainbow Smoke Escape Technique. He learned it from a cave by chance. With this technique, he had escaped many disasters. Other than Demon King and Crocodile he met a month ago, he had never seen anyone who could compete with him in this way. He did not expect to meet someone who was even better than him today. Just now, he had boasted in front of Yong Fu that even if he couldn't win in a head-on battle, he could use his escape technique to help him win the last round. But now, it seemed that he had been too confident. His expression changed a few times, and in the end, he gritted his teeth and formed a seal. In an instant, the escape light actually sped up slightly. Zhang Boyan's eyes were sharp. He could tell at a glance that this was some kind of secret technique that could increase one's speed for a short period of time at the expense of vitality. However, he was not worried at all. The battle between the 2 of them was within Constellation Valley. Including the surrounding cliffs, it was only a little more than 50 miles. Where could this person escape to? All he had to do was follow them from behind, and when they ran out of energy, he would be able to easily take care of them. Taoist Jiang was not unaware of this, but just now, he saw that for some reason, Zhang Yan was not following him. Instead, Yong Fu was chasing after him with his magic multiplier. According to the rules of the battle, Yong Fu could help him stop Zhang Boyan 3 times. This was enough. As long as he could stall for 2 hours, he would win. Seeing that he was about to leave Constellation Valley, he turned around and flew in Yong Fu's direction. Not long after, the two of them were extremely close. He shouted, "Help me, Daoist brother." Yong Fu said, "Go ahead, Daoist Jiang. I'll help you stop him for a while." The Daoist with the surname Jiang flashed past him. When Zhang Boyan saw this from afar, a cunning look flashed across his eyes. He suddenly shook his body and a Yuanying clone flew out. It rolled in the air and also turned into a yellow smoke, chasing after Daoist Jiang. When Yong Fu saw that Zhang Boyan had suddenly turned into 2 people, he couldn't tell which one was real and which one was fake. He could only focus on one of them. With a wave of his sleeve, he shot out a fire dart. The yellow smoke circled around and dodged the fire dart. However, it seemed to have a mind of its own. After circling around it a few times, it refused to let go. Meanwhile, the other yellow smoke didn't change its direction and continued to chase after Daoist Jiang. The yellow smoke circled around a few more times before suddenly dispersing. Zhang Boyan appeared in the sky and pointed at it. A bolt of lightning shot out and shook the fire dart away. Then, he glanced at Yong Fu and revealed a cold smile. With a shake of his body, over 100 devils flew out from behind him. They let out miserable cries and rushed in Yong Fu's direction. Yong Fu didn't expect Zhang Boyan to abandon Daoist Jiang and attack him instead. He hurriedly made a hand seal and forced out 2 beams of light from the high cloud above him. These were the tribulation powers of water and fire refined from the purple tribulation fruit. They were extraordinary, and with a loud bang, the dozen devils in front of him were smashed into pieces. The devils behind him seemed to recognize their power and whistled past him, circling behind him. Yong Fu's heart trembled. However, before he could turn around to deal with them, he saw that the devils he had scattered just now had actually gathered together again. Chapter 630. P.S. I came back late from dinner. There are at least 2 more hours tomorrow. Yong Fu was shocked. He had never seen such a strange technique before. That demon couldn't even refine the water and fire tribulation power. But after a moment of panic, he calmed down. He had fought many evil sect cultivators before, so he knew that even though their spells were strange and evil, most of them were afraid of lightning spells. Thus, he shouted and circulated all the magic power in his body. The strong cloud above his head trembled repeatedly, and several dozens of strong lightning bolts shot out in a row. The flashing lightning bolts fell one after another and smashed into the demonic chi, causing the demonic head that had just been gathered to explode again. However, after a moment, the scattered demonic chi seemed to gather again and actually condense back into its original state. Yong Fu couldn't help but take a step back, and then a cold wind came from behind him. This reminded him that he was deep within the opponent's spell. When he raised his head again, he saw that the sky was filled with black wind and miserable fog, and it was difficult to see anything beyond 30 feet. His expression was solemn. He quickly took out more than 10 green absolute thunder beads. This kind of treasure was created by the combined efforts of several Yuanying cultivators. It was also obtained from the Celestial City. 1 bead was equivalent to tens of thousands of spirit shells. It was the best at restraining evil techniques. Originally, he wanted to keep it as a trump card to help Daoist Jiang. But seeing how fierce these demons were, he had no choice but to take it out. With a flick of his hand, he tossed a dozen or so lightning beads downward. Suddenly, a deafening explosion of thunder rang out, and the approaching demons were all scattered. Then, he didn't have time to look at the result. He threw out a few fire darts. A streak of fire tore open a crack in the smoke. He seized the opportunity, activated the artifact under his feet, and dashed out. But before he could see the sky, 4 lights suddenly fell at the same time. His expression changed. He recognized that it was the 4 Dharma treasures that Zhang Boyan had just now taken out. He hurriedly put his sleeves up. With a bang, he was shaken and fell down. He raised his hand and saw that only half of his sleeve was left. His expression couldn't help but become even uglier. The Taoist robe he wore was also a treasured robe that could withstand the combined attack of the opponent's Dharma treasures. But it was difficult to protect them. He was not injured at all. It was already extremely fortunate. Howling sounds suddenly rang out in his ears. Those devils actually condensed into physical form again, but for some reason, they didn't immediately pounce on him. Instead, it kept circling around him, causing him to feel annoyed. He hurriedly activated his Fa Li and activated the treasure light that protected his body. Unconsciously, he calmed down a little and took out a bright jade bottle from his sleeve. He plugged the bottle and chanted a spell. The bottle tilted slightly and tipped outwards. After a series of popping sounds, a large cloud of thick yellow smoke came out from the bottle and collided with the devil chi. A burst of scarlet flames suddenly rose up. Wherever the flames passed, whether it was the devil chi or the black mist, they were all burned into nothingness. Zhang Boyan snorted coldly. This Taoist Yong really did have some ability, even having such a formidable treasure to protect himself. However, he was unperturbed, not a trace of anxiety on his face, nor did he make any attempt to salvage the situation. The smoke moved very slowly and only burned a few devils. The rest dodged to the side, so there weren't too many losses. As long as he went back and meditated for a few days, he would be able to refine them again with a bit of effort. Yong Fu sent the smoke everywhere, but this action seemed to be only to vent his suppressed anger. Seeing that the devils had taken the initiative to avoid the smoke, he no longer made such a futile effort. He put away the jade bottle and summoned a pearl to hover over his head. In an instant, a soft light fell down and protected his body. He might as well wholeheartedly defend himself. He had brought many treasures with him this time, and there were still a few he hadn't taken out. If he used them, he might be able to break through the blockade of the 4 treasures. However, he was also calculating in his heart. Since Zhang Boyan was here to tangle with him, he definitely wouldn't be able to pursue Taoist Jiang. After 2 hours, he would have won this battle. In fact, Zhang Boyan was thinking the same thing as Yong Fu. Although he wasn't a direct disciple of the Netherworld Spring sect and didn't have the qualifications to learn a superior technique like the illusory intribulation water of 10,000 spirits, he had cultivated the mysterious technique of connecting Netherworld and revealing divinity, which could create a Yuanying doppelganger. If the doppelganger and the real body fought together, it would be difficult for the opponent to distinguish the real from the fake if they didn't have a secret technique. The Taoist surnamed Jiang had his Yuanying doppelganger chasing after him. No matter where he ran, Yong Fu would know clearly. He was prepared to wait until the Taoist surnamed Jiang had used up most of his transcendence energy before dealing with him. As for the Grand Elder of the Mount Yi sect before him, he only needed to trap him here so that he couldn't disturb him. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Taoist surnamed Jiang didn't know that the one chasing after him was only a Yuanying doppelganger. He was still grumbling in his heart about why Yong Fu didn't stop this person. Previously, he had obtained a secret medicine from Yong Fu called the swamp pill. After a cultivator consumed it, they only needed to circulate their transcendence energy for a short 7 or 8 breaths to recover to their original state. However, the yellow smoke behind him was extremely close, so he didn't even have the chance to take the pill and refine it. Unknowingly, he had already flown for nearly an hour. He knew that if he continued like this, his opponent would catch up to him in less than a moment. He thought to himself, I don't know why fellow Yong couldn't stop this person just now. Fortunately, he can help me 3 times. When I turn around, I'll ask him to help me again. As long as I succeed this time, I still have some hope of victory. Thinking of this, he turned around and flew back in a circle. Zhang Boyan knew Taoist Jiang's movements like the back of his hand. When he sensed that Taoist Jiang was heading in his direction, he smiled sinisterly. Not long after, a streak of light appeared in his northern field of vision. He focused and saw that the momentum was much weaker than before. It was obvious that he had used up too much transcendence energy. This was the best time to make a move. Thus, without any hesitation, he threw Yong Fu aside and turned into yellow smoke as he flew away. The Taoist surnamed Jiang suddenly saw the endless black smoke in front of him and also sensed that something was wrong. He couldn't help but hesitate and paced back and forth in the distance for a while. In the end, he decided not to go forward and turned around, wanting to escape. However, in just this short period of time, Zhang Boyan had already caught up. He rose into the sky and waved his sleeve down. In an instant, the sky darkened, and a black cloud of devilish mist had already appeared, covering the sky within a few kilometers. The surroundings suddenly became pitch black. He couldn't even see his fingers in front of him. The Taoist surnamed Zhang's heart sank. He knew that he had fallen into the opponent's trap. Due to his cautiousness, he didn't dare to move recklessly. Instead, he stopped his body and made a few hand signs. First, he activated the protective light around his body. Then, he quickly took out a treasured umbrella. He held the handle of the umbrella and opened it up with his other hand. Then, he activated his mana and countless talismans started to circulate. Vaguely, a three-legged golden bird could be seen flying in the air. Countless golden flames fluttered along with its wings and fell from above, creating holes in the demonic smoke in the sky. This was called the Little Golden Crow Umbrella, which he had borrowed from Yong Fu. The celestial city had stood on the Divine House Mountain for thousands of years. There were many powerful Dharma treasures in the city that could only be used by the ruler of the celestial city. For this battle, the two of them had taken out almost all the famous Dharma treasures in the celestial city. However, Zhang Boyan laughed softly. The Taoist surnamed Jiang looked mighty at the moment, but in reality, he was about to lose. This person was originally skilled in flying, but now that he had stopped to fight with Zhang Boyan, he would only lose even faster. He waved his hand and a light flashed behind him. The sword, ring, nail, and tablet, the four Dharma treasures, flew up at the same time and spun down. The Taoist surnamed Jiang panicked. Just now, he was being attacked by the four Dharma treasures at the same time. He felt that he couldn't defend himself, so he thought of a way to escape. Now that he saw this scene, he didn't care if his Dharma treasures were damaged or not. He hurriedly raised the Golden Crow umbrella in his hand. But just as the four Dharma treasures were about to hit the umbrella, Zhang Boyan smiled strangely. He crooked his finger and the four Dharma treasures suddenly separated. They went around the umbrella and attacked from four different directions. If it wasn't a Xian artifact that had a spirit of its own, a normal cultivator could at most use 2 or 3 of them. But these four Dharma treasures, which were obviously only high-level spiritual artifacts, seemed to have a spirit of their own in Zhang Boyan's hands. This change was so sudden that the Taoist surnamed Jiang didn't have time to react. In an instant, the protective Dharma treasure light was smashed into pieces. But when the four Dharma treasures went further in, the Taoist surnamed Jiang roared angrily and used his Fa Li. The robe on his body shot out rays of light that were several feet long and actually blocked the four Dharma treasures outside. Zhang Boyan chuckled and lightly formed a spell. A banner flew out from the high cloud. He reached out and took it. With a wave, countless thin and withered black hands reached out from the black fog. Like black ropes, they circled around and trapped the Taoist surnamed Jiang. After a while, the rays of light on the Taoist surnamed Jiang's robe gradually dimmed. It was obvious that his Fa Li was about to be exhausted. Zhang Boyan only needed to add a little more force and he could burn this person to death. All the essence and blood in this person's body would belong to him. But after this tempting thought turned over in his mind a few times, he finally gave up. As long as he defeated this person, this battle would be considered a victory. Under the witness of the various sect leaders of the Divine House Mountain, Zhang Yan would be able to smoothly take over the Divine City. But if the opponent died, it would add many unexpected variables. This was not worth it. At this moment, there was a stir in the demonic fog. Another figure of light pierced through it. It was Yong Fu, who was unrestrained and had rushed out. When he was in midair and saw the scene in front of him, an indescribable melancholy arose in his heart. He let out a long sigh and slowly flew up. When he was 300 feet away, he saw 4 transcendent artifacts flying in the air and blocking his way. He didn't advance any further. Instead, he cupped his hands at Zhang Boyan and said, "Please release fellow Taoist Zhang, Zhang. I admit defeat." Perhaps someone else would think that the outcome was already a foregone conclusion, but Zhang Boyan was extremely shrewd and ruthless. Earlier, Taoist Yong had said that he could help Taoist Zhang 3 times in a critical moment. Naturally, the deception in his words counted, so Zhang Boyan remained unmoved. He waved the banner and dragged the Taoist surnamed Zhang in front of him. He grinned hideously and said, "I want you to say it yourself. Do you admit defeat?" When Yong Fu saw that Taoist Zhang didn't reveal any openings, the urge to take out his transcendent artifact and fight it out immediately arose in his heart. He could see that the Taoist surnamed Zhang was in the opponent's hands. He was afraid of accidentally injuring the Taoist surnamed Zhang, but he wasn't completely confident, so he could only give up in the end. When the Taoist surnamed Zhang saw Zhang Boyan's ferocious expression, he couldn't help but shiver. He said, this lowly Taoist is willing to admit defeat." As soon as he said this, Yong Fu's expression became dejected. He cupped his hands and said, "Zhang, you've won the 3rd round. I'm willing to hand over the position of Divine City's ruler." Chapter 631. 3 days after the battle in Constellation Valley. In front of Ink Heart Mountain, 2 rays of light came from the horizon. They came close in a moment and descended from the sky, landing near a clear spring on the mountainside. Then, Zhang Yan and Yong Fu walked out of the light. Zhang Yan turned around and saw that the mist in front of him was very thick. He waved his sleeve and dispersed the mist, revealing a pond in front of him. It was about a mu in size, and the ripples were clear and cold. There was also a thin curtain of water flowing down from between the rocks, gurgling unceasingly. On his left, with his back against the cliff, about 1 zhang above the ground, there was a deep and secluded cave. It was covered in lush vegetation, half concealing its mysteriousness. He could vaguely make out the 3 words, Ningyong Cave, on its upper edge. Pointing, he asked, "Master Yong, is this the entrance to the immortal city?" Yong Fu chuckled and shook his head. "No." He turned around and walked back a dozen steps until he came to an inconspicuous well. He stepped on it and said, "This is it." Zhang Yan looked carefully and saw that half of the well's railing had collapsed. The stone edge was covered in moss and mud, and there was no restriction on it at all. He nodded and said, "So that's how it is. What's real is fake, and what's fake is real. It's well hidden." Yong Fu said, "Only the Celestial City's ruler can enter and exit this place, so we have to be careful." The Celestial City was not built in an obvious place but was hidden deep inside the mountain to prevent it from being taken away by outside cultivators. Other than the main gate, this was the only way in and out. Only the ruler of the Celestial City knew about it. Zhang Yan walked around the well twice and said, "There are no restrictions here. Even though it can fool some people, it's not guaranteed. There should be some backup." Yong Fu revealed a look of surprise and praised, "Zhang Jinren's guess is correct. There's also a 1,000-year-old toad spirit. It received a favor from a certain leader and volunteered to guard this place. I heard that it once received the teachings of a certain powerful cultivator. Although its face is a little ugly, its cultivation is profound. Zhang Jinren, please don't underestimate it." Zhang Yan nodded to show that he understood. Yong Fu took out an item from his sleeve and slowly handed it to Zhang Yan. He said in a low voice, "This is the city's restriction talisman, and you can enter the main control center with it. After you refine the restriction tablet, you can control the restrictions in the city. I'll give it to fellow Taoist today." Zhang Yan reached out and took it. He cupped his hands towards Yong Fu. Yong Fu returned the greeting and said, I am no longer in charge, so it is inconvenient for me to accompany you. Zhenren Zhang, farewell. After saying that, he tapped his feet and rode the wind. He floated into the clouds, and a moment later, he was nowhere to be seen. Zhang Yan held the talisman in front of him and sent a stream of spiritual energy into it. With his current magical power, it was impossible for him to escape. However, with just a slight movement, he had completely refined this item and turned it into his own. Then, he tossed it upwards, and the astral cloud above him rotated slightly. He put it away. He looked down at the deep well and smiled. He made a hand seal and rose up, turning into a beam of light and leaped down. The moment he entered the water, he used the water escape technique and passed through the long well in one breath, arriving at the bottom. At this moment, his body felt light, and he realized that he was in a cave that was 1,000 feet high. This should be the belly of the mental demon mountain, and it had been hollowed out by someone using a large amount of magical power. Looking up, there were tens of thousands of pearls and jade embedded on the cave walls, and they shone brightly like it was daytime. Below his feet was a deep blue pool, and above it was an exquisite stone bridge that led deeper. He waved his sleeves and floated in. After crossing the stone bridge and passing through a few cave doors, he arrived at another cave abode. It was also spacious. There was a shallow layer of clear water beneath his feet, and there were tens of thousands of stone barricades that looked like chess pieces. There were 7 colored banners on top of them, and there were traces of greenish-purple light emitted from the banners, faintly showing the patterns of stars. As he walked, the talismans and banners resonated with each other, constantly shaking and making the rumbling sound of waves. One could imagine how powerful it would be once the restrictions here were activated. Before Zhang Yan came here, he had heard Taoist Chu's description that the immortal city was surrounded by mountains, and the inside was protected by jade stones and spiritual wood. If there was a formation formed by these banners, it could be said to be impregnable. If he did not choose to fight this time, but to forcefully seize it, it would be very difficult to succeed. However, this was also because of the desolate mountain boundary of the Divine House Mountain, and the fact that there was no abode heaven guarding it, which was why it was so heavily guarded. It was said that the immortal cities established by the Zhongtai sect were all lonely in the sky, and could be seen from thousands of miles away. Following him forward, not long after, he arrived in front of a half-moon cave door. There was a golden copper toad the size of a human squatting in front of it, and it seemed to have sensed his approach. It suddenly let out a buzzing sound and shouted, "Who are you?" Zhang Yan stopped, took out the talisman, and waved it at the golden copper toad. The voice suddenly came to a realization, so the person in charge has changed again. At this moment, the golden copper toad spouted a white gas from its nose aperture, and it spun on the ground. Then, a short Taoist with a round belly and short legs walked out, holding a horsetail whisk in his hand, and 2 mustaches above his lips. His face was bumpy, and his face was ugly, but his eyes were very clear. He bowed and said, "The little demon guarding the door, Tian Chong, greets the person in charge." Zhang Yan looked at the top of the demon's head, and there were actually 3 high clouds. It was obvious that the demon's cultivation was at the 2nd level of Yuanying, and its appearance was righteous but not evil, clear and pure. He knew that this demon walked the path of Qi, and should be cultivating the superior cultivation method of Xianmen, so he also bowed and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." Tian Chong said loudly, "This little demon will open the door for the person in charge." He turned around, flicked the horsetail whisk, and the cave door behind him rumbled open. He pointed and said, "The place after this is an important place in the Celestial City, and many rare treasures are also hidden inside. Only the person in charge can enter, so forgive me for not being able to accompany you." Zhang Yan thought, so this door can only be opened by this toad demon. He expressed his gratitude before striding in with large strides, and he arrived at the inner room in less than a dozen steps. He swept his gaze around and noticed that this abode wasn't very large compared to the outer room. It was only around 100 meters in length and width, and there was a stone tablet at the center. It was where the mechanism of the restriction was located. Behind it was a square table, and on the table was a scroll of jade scrolls. Against the wall, there was a stone cabinet, and the layout was very simple. Zhang Yan walked to the front of the stone tablet, took a few glances, and walked around to the table. He picked up the scroll of jade scrolls and slowly opened it. He looked at it and found that what was written on it was the incantation to refine this tablet, and he had to follow it to completely control the formation. Because the incantation wasn't complicated, and there were only 100 sentences, he only glanced at it a few times and memorized it. Only then did he come to the front of the mechanism tablet. He slapped his hand on it and poured the mana in his body into it. As he walked according to the incantation, the tablet let out a series of rumbling sounds, and then the entire cave shook as if it would collapse at any time. However, he seemed to have expected this, and his expression didn't change at all, and his movements didn't stop at all. After about a moment, the trembling of the tablet slowly calmed down, and then there was a loud sound. Light appeared, and 8 flag doors flew out around him. Zhang Yan looked around and nodded slightly. From this moment on, he could be considered to have the celestial city in his hands, and he could use this flag door to go to any place in the mountain. He chanted a few incantations and pointed at the tablet. It floated like a water mirror, and the various scenes inside and outside the mountain appeared. After looking for a while, he saw Taoist Chu's figure. After thinking for a moment, he walked towards one of the flag doors. In an instant, the scenery in front of him changed, and he was already at the foot of Inkheart Mountain. Before Zhang Yan and Yong Fu went together, he ordered Taoist Chu to wait here. At this moment, when he suddenly saw Zhang Yan appear in front of him, he was stunned at first, and then he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He said, "Has the manor head taken control of the celestial city's mechanism restriction?" Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. Yes. Taoist Chu was overjoyed, and he couldn't help but say, "It's been more than 200 years. After Master Shen passed away, the position of manor head finally fell into the hands of the Deep Abyss sect." He couldn't help but be excited. After Zhang Yan took the position of manor head, the Deep Abyss sect could naturally occupy 70% of all the cultivation items in the celestial city. It was equivalent to gathering the power of dozens of sects to support one sect. It could be seen just by looking at how prosperous the mountain sect had been over the years. If the celestial city head was a bit more ruthless, he would suppress those sects, and never let them have the possibility of threatening him. The reason why Yong Fu treated the Deep Abyss sect like this, and did everything possible to push them out, other than the fact that Sangzhu Peak was a blessed land, and he had the intention to occupy it, was because he was afraid that the Deep Abyss sect would obtain some mysterious technique from Shen Baishuang, and someone would come out to compete with him for the position. After being happy for a while, he seemed to suddenly remember something, and he slapped his forehead. "I almost forgot about the important matter." He took out a stack of jade talisman from his sleeve, and handed it over, saying, "Manor head, there are a total of 37 sects on Mount Shinwu. Today, 36 sects have already sent over their names and genealogies. Manor head, please have a look." This jade talisman was the name list of the personal disciples and elders of each sect on Mount Shinwu. If the celestial city head changed hands, they would have to send this item, and this was a sign of respect. In the future, whenever these sects recruited disciples, expanded their sects, or increased their cultivation, they would have to send him this. Zhang Yan accepted it calmly. After looking through it, he asked, "Which sect did not send over their genealogies?" Taoist Chu replied, "This sect is called the Longxiang sect. I heard that, like Master Shen and Manor Head, they also came from the outer seas. However, they have never interacted with other sects, and even in this battle, they did not send any disciples. When Sage Yong was around, he never intervened, so this little brother does not know their background. Manor Head, please tell us how to deal with them." Zhang Yan's thoughts turned. The celestial city head of the sect was equivalent to the sect master of the various sections. Normally, they would not allow such a maverick sect to exist in their territory, but this Longxiang sect could do so. There must be a reason for this. Chapter 632. A month after Zhang Yan took charge of the Celestial City, the Hanyuan School started a large-scale construction project on Sangzhou Peak. They built palaces, pavilions, and residences. They also set up a formation 100 miles away from the mountain gate. The atmosphere of the school was instantly renewed. On top of the mountain, in a 7-story pavilion, Zhang Yan sat alone in front of a table. He held a Taoist book in his hand and was engrossed in reading it. This was a book that recorded the customs and people of various places in the Donghua continent. Because the Donghua continent was a mixture of celestial beings and mortals, there was a lot of trade between celestial cities. Therefore, the items used by cultivators were recorded in great detail. In order to achieve Yuanjin Dharmakaya, other than Jun Yang's Qi of Essence, he also needed the White Moon Essence. If he were to rely on his own strength, even if he could search the world for it, he did not know how long it would take. Fortunately, after he entered the Celestial City, he did not have to worry about many common elixir materials, he could buy them from other countries. However, there was still a problem. To make the white moon fruit, other than a large number of rare flowers and herbs, there were also many rare spiritual treasures. He could only rely on himself to slowly inquire and search. He thought in his heart, with my current cultivation, I'll be able to reach the second level of the nascent soul realm in 30 to 40 years at most. After that, I'll need to use the Qian Kun spiritual qi to cultivate. The medicinal pills that senior martial brother Zhou gave me are only enough for a year at most. If I can't find them by then, my cultivation will definitely be delayed. I need to plan ahead. After thinking for a while, he put down the jade scroll and stood up to the window. He looked out of the mountain with his hands behind his back. At this moment, Jing Yu's voice came from outside, "Master, Taoist Chu wants to see you." "Zhang Yan, invite junior brother Chu in." Chu Mu walked into the pavilion and bowed respectfully. Then he said, "Master, there have been many disciples coming to seek Tao. Because you have been in seclusion for a few days, I did not dare to make the decision on my own. Therefore, I arranged for them to stay in the new courtyard at the foot of the mountain. I hope you can tell me how to deal with them." Zhang Yan turned around and asked, "Who are they?" To know about the change of ownership of the Celestial City, they must not be ordinary people. Chu Mu replied, "They are all disciples of nobles and nobles. They often interact with the sects in the mountain." The Divine House Mountain was divided into east and west with Luoduan Mountain as the boundary. There were few people in Dongye. Most of their residences were in the Western Kingdom, and they were divided into 9 countries and 76 strongholds. They had a population of more than 12 million, and they frequently interacted with the Taoist cultivation sections. Most of them were related by marriage. After the nobles of the imperial clan learned that the immortal city had changed owners, all of them acted upon hearing the news and sent their disciples to the mountain to cultivate. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. These people were all disciples. They wanted to establish a relationship with him to ensure the prosperity of their clan. At the same time, they could also help the Deep Cave sect spread their roots throughout the mountain world. It was a win-win situation, so they could accept it. In the past, when Shen Baishuang was still around, he thought that those who were born in the royal family were used to wealth and could not endure the hardships of cultivation. Therefore, the sect only accepted disciples from poor families. For example, Chu Muron's ancestors had been gathering herbs for generations. However, in Zhang Yan's eyes, since they were establishing a sect, they should be treated equally regardless of their background. As long as one had the heart to cultivate, they should be given a chance. Therefore, he said, "I want to follow the example of Qinsang and establish an upper and lower house. All disciples who come to cultivate will first be arranged to enter the lower house to learn the scripture of pure breath. Those with good aptitude and a firm Taoist heart can enter the upper house to cultivate. Junior apprentice brother Zhao can arrange this." Chu Muron pondered for a while and said cheerfully, "Junior apprentice brother Zhao is calm and generous, so you should be able to do this. I will arrange it later." He paused for a while and said, "One more thing. Among the 37 sects in the Divine House Mountain, there are 7 that own shellfish farms. Every year, they can obtain more than 10,000 shellfish. Since the Celestial City has changed owners, according to the rules, we can collect the shellfish once. I wonder if we can do this. Zhang Yan turned around and raised his eyebrows. If that's the case, there are only 70 to 80,000 shellfish a year? Chu Muran said with a smile, it seems to be a little less. Most of the shellfish used in Dongshan continent are shellfish. These shellfish that are nurtured from spiritual veins can often be counted as 10, so the number is not small. Apart from 30% that can be kept, the rest have to be handed over to the Celestial City. At this point, he said regretfully, with the help of the Celestial City, Mounties sect has more than 1,000 disciples in the past 200 years. If there is no major change in our Hanyuan sect, we will not be able to reach this number in the future. It's a pity that the Beima Ocean domain has been occupied by the demon tribes from outside, so we can no longer collect the shellfish. Otherwise, our sect would be more prosperous. Zhang Yan laughed heartily and said, time passes and the world changes. Junior apprentice brother, do you know that you can't do it? Just now, the Celestial City has changed owners. The people's hearts are not stable, so let's forget about it this time. Daoist Chu's heart skipped a beat and he thought to himself, senior apprentice brother, do you have any other plans? However, since Zhang Yan did not continue to talk about it, he did not dare to ask more. He bowed and said, I have nothing else to do, so I dare not disturb the cultivation of the headmaster. I will take my leave now. Zhang Yan said gently, junior apprentice brother, there are many things to do in our Hanyuan sect. Because of my cultivation, there are many things that I can't take care of. I can only ask you and my 2 junior apprentice brothers to be more attentive. Daoist Chu quickly said, senior apprentice brother, you are too serious. As an elder of the sect, it is natural for me to share the headmaster's burden. As he finished speaking, he bowed again and left. After he went out, he was greeted by a gust of cool wind. He took a deep breath and felt refreshed. Looking at the mountain gate becoming more prosperous day by day, even though he had to take care of the common things every day, he still enjoyed it. He stamped his feet and a smoke rose up, turning into a white mist and flying away. Zhang Yan returned to the back of the table and sat down. After thinking for a moment, he drew a talisman with 2 fingers and flicked his fingers. A spiritual light shot down the mountain. Not long after, the Wang sisters came together and bowed to him. They said in unison, disciple greets master. Zhang Yan smiled and said, rise. Have the 2 of you studied the geography of the Dongshan continent in detail these few days? When Wang Kating heard this, her beautiful eyes lit up. She rushed to say, Kating and sister have been studying the geography of the continent in the Celestial City. There are a total of 132 scrolls. As long as it is in the map, we have memorized it. Zhang Yan nodded and said, that's good. You can set off in a few days to search for medicine. The Dongshan continent is not like the Donghua continent. When you travel, there is no help from fellow Taoists. Even though Kai Wei has the protection of a true artifact, you still need to be careful. I have a cloud-piercing shuttle here. I will give it to the 2 of you to use as a means of transportation. He pointed with his finger. A spiritual light flew into Wang Kating's sachet. The 2 sisters quickly knelt down and thanked him for his kindness. Zhang Yan gave them a few more instructions before ordering them to leave. After that, he started to cast a spell and closed the forbidden door of the 7 Treasures Great Pagoda Pavilion. He then cast a few more spells and lit up the 7 pearls in the pagoda one by one. Not long after, threads of spiritual energy continuously gathered on the praying mat beneath him. This treasure was originally a gift from Shenbai Shuang. It was originally the treasure of Zhui Yuming, the palace master of the Duzhen Hall. It sat in this pagoda, as if he was in a blessed land. In addition, Cangzhou Peak was the place with the thickest spiritual energy in the Divine House Mountain. Even though it was not as good as Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake, it was not too far off. After Zhang Yan sat down, He flicked his sleeves. He took out the 2 ice boulder stone embryos. During the battle, in order to get this item from Yongfu, he did not hesitate to admit defeat. It was because this item was related to Bai Yueying. The ice boulder stone embryos were not rare. Instead, the 2,000-year-old scorpion spiders were of great use to him. If this kind of ancient poisonous insect was fed with a strange fruit called the silk lotus seed, after a dozen years, a flawless pearl would slowly condense in its stomach. It was called the Panchan pill, and it was one of the ingredients to refine the white moon heroic fruit. Other than ancient mutated poisonous insects, it was best if they had cultivated for more than 100 years. However, this pair of scorpion spiders had cultivated for more than 1,000 years. Although their vitality had been greatly damaged because of the ice plate, as long as he could refine the ice plate and save them, it would not be a problem for him to nurture the pill. Zhang Yan aimed at the ice plate in his right hand. The astral cloud above his head shook, and he used the true light of fire to wrap it firmly. He used his dermic powers to slowly refine it. Although the ice plate was a miraculous object, it could not withstand his mysterious technique. In just a moment, it slowly melted like wax. However, he needed to protect the scorpion spider inside, so he had no choice but to concentrate, unwilling to make the slightest mistake. After 6 hours, the entire ice plate was completely melted, leaving only the scorpion spider in place, lying there motionlessly. Zhang Yan was not anxious. He watched attentively. Since this item was used by Yongfu during the battle, it should not be an inanimate object. After a moment, the scorpion spider moved slightly. After a while, there was a rustling sound in the inner chamber. The 6 pairs of limbs under its body slowly opened up, supporting its body. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed slightly. With a flick of his finger, dozens of shell pearls flew out and landed on the ground. The scorpion spider was immediately attracted by the shell pearls that were rich in spiritual qi. It opened its mouth and swallowed them. However, it had only eaten a few pearls when its body suddenly trembled. It staggered a few steps forward and fell to the ground. Its body shriveled at a rapid speed. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a ball of dry skin. It was obvious that its vitality was exhausted and it was completely dead. Zhang Yan's expression did not change. This poisonous insect had been sealed in the ice for more than 1,000 years, so this result was not unexpected. Fortunately, there was still one more, so he could try again. If it did not work, he could only leave the mountain and search for it himself. This kind of ancient poisonous insects usually gathered in one place and were extremely difficult to catch. As for those species that liked to live alone, their cultivation level was usually very high. If a cultivator had not reached the Yuanying realm, he would only be courting death if he went there. He fixed his eyes on the last ice plate. Once again, he used his mysterious technique and released a true light of fire to refine it. This time, it was much faster than the last time. In less than 4 hours, the ice plate was completely melted. When Zhang Yan saw that it was almost done, he retracted the true light of fire. But at this moment, he saw a black shadow suddenly sprang up and headed straight for his face. This scorpion spider had just escaped and it became ferocious and was eager to bite people. However, Zhang Yan's spirit was lifted. He smiled and said, "Good timing." His body did not move. A yellow light flew down from above and firmly pressed it to the ground. The scorpion spider's head struggled continuously. Its ferocious mouth trembled and made hissing sounds. Just now, there were still a lot of shell pearls scattered on the ground by Zhang Yan. A few of them just happened to be next to the scorpion spider's mouth. It realized that it could not break free from the shackles. So it bent down to swallow them. But after eating a few pearls, it suddenly trembled and let out a shrill cry. It was like the scorpion spider on top of it. Its body shriveled rapidly and finally stopped moving. Zhang Yan could not help but frown. Could it be because it swallowed the shell pearls? He thought about it carefully and dismissed this thought. This kind of poisonous insect was also psychic. If it was harmful to its body, it would not eat it even if it was forced. He shook his head. The 2 scorpion spiders were dead. Although he felt that it was a pity, he was not really disappointed. He raised his hand and was about to melt these 2 things. But at this moment, his movement paused. He saw that the scorpion spider's body suddenly split outwards as if it was tearing a piece of paper. Something slowly crawled out from inside. Chapter 633. Atop Mount E's Jade Gown Peak, Yong Fu was drinking wine with a yellow-robed cultivator, chatting and laughing merrily. The eldest disciple, Bai Jieying, hid far away and stared at the man with undisguised disgust in his eyes. The man had prominent cheekbones, slightly sunken eyes, short and thick eyebrows, and a sinister glint in his eyes. Light flickered uncertainly as if he was constantly plotting something. At this moment, he suddenly put down his wine cup and walked to the edge of the cliff. Looking at the mountains hidden in the misty sea of clouds, he sighed. In the past, several elders of my Xiangqing sect were killed by Shen Baishuang, and I was also driven out by him. I always remember this humiliation in my heart, constantly thinking of returning to Shenwu Mountain to rebuild the sect. Taoist Yong smiled. Brother Guangyuan erected a stone tablet in front of Chu and named it the Inkheart Stone. I presume this is your intention. The yellow-robed cultivator turned around and said loudly, "That's right." He took a few steps back to the table and placed his hand on the table, looking down at Yong Fu. Although I thought of returning every day, fellow Taoist Yong was previously in charge of Immortal City and could be considered one of us. The Deep Abyss School has long lost its former prestige, so I didn't meddle. However, I heard that Taoist Shen sent a martial nephew to the school and used despicable methods to seize fellow Taoists' position. This truly made me sympathize with him and filled with righteous indignation. I was thinking of how to seek justice for fellow Taoist. Taoist Yong cupped his hands. Brother Guangyuan is righteous, I thank you in advance. Although he spoke politely, he didn't take it seriously. Back when Shen Baishuang expelled the Xiangqing sect, he saw that Wang Guangyuan was only a core formation junior, so he spared his life. Later on, it was also due to this person's good fortune that he actually met a good master and cultivated bitterly for nearly 300 years, only achieving the Yuanying realm a few years ago. So what if he came back before? This time, he just happened to find an excuse. However, since this person was willing to stand up for him, there was no harm to him, so he naturally wouldn't stop him. He only reminded him out of morality. Taoist Zhang's cultivation is extremely high. I don't know what kind of Taoist technique he used to injure the profound weapon I borrowed from Taoist Fang. There was also the guest elder from his sect. His fighting skills were also quite brilliant. All in all, even though the Hanyuan sect does not have a great cultivator like Jinren Shen in charge, it is not to be underestimated. Fellow Taoist Wang, you must be careful. Hearing this, Wang Guangyuan actually burst into laughter. Waving his hand, he replied, "So Brother Yong is worried about this matter. I was wondering why I wasn't as forthright as before. So it turns out that you have this layer of apprehension. Fine, I will tell you the truth. I didn't come alone, and my senior apprentice brother Chu Changji has also promised me this. I will do my best to help you. Enlightened Master Chu is here too." Yong Fu's heart shivered slightly. His hand that had just picked up the wine cup trembled uncontrollably. He then slowly brought it to his mouth and drank it slowly. This was to cover up his loss of composure. He had heard of this enlightened Master Chu for a long time. He had achieved Yuanying a few hundred years ago. This person was naturally aggressive and was not someone to be trifled with. He didn't know what level his cultivation had reached. If this person also came to help, it meant that Wang Guangyuan was not the only one behind this. It wasn't as simple as it seemed. Previously, he was just brushing it off. Now, he had no choice but to take this matter seriously. Because he guessed that there seemed to be more to this matter, he asked a few questions from the side. However, Wang Guangyuan's mouth was very tight and did not leak any information. Seeing this situation, Yongfu no longer persisted and asked, "Does Brother Guangyuan think that Gao Zhongyuan is to your liking?" This time, Wang Guangyuan nodded repeatedly. Of course, of course. This person's aptitude is excellent. I have already accepted him as my personal disciple. In the future, he will inherit my mantle. I still have to thank fellow Taoist Yong for recommending such an excellent disciple. I heard that he was originally from the Hanyuan sect. Hehe, how could that small sect accommodate my disciple? In my opinion, Zhongyuan's future achievements will be limitless. Yongfu was astonished. He also knew that Gao Zhongyuan's aptitude was good, but he didn't think that Wang Guanyuan's evaluation of him would be so high. However, this person's heart was not righteous. Even if Gao Zhongyuan's aptitude was twice as high, Yongfu still wouldn't accept him as a disciple. Wang Guanyuan glanced at Yongfu, a strange smile appearing on his face. From his sleeve, he took out a letter and placed it down. Pushing it over, he said, "Little brother came out in a hurry this time and didn't bring any attendants. Only Brother Yong can deliver this letter to the Hanyuan sect on my behalf." Yongfu looked at the large, Chu characters stamped on the seal of the letter and couldn't help but frown. He didn't extend his hand to accept the letter. Instead, with some caution, he asked, "What's written in the letter?" Although he was happy to see Wang Guanyuan step forward and fight, he didn't want the Mount Yi sect to be dragged into the water for no reason and be used by others. Wang Guanyuan snorted and said, "Brother Yong, don't worry. This letter was brought by me from Zhongtai. According to the rules, if the Immortal City's overseer is changed, then Zhongtai can collect an additional sum." Yongfu asked doubtfully, "It's that simple?" Wang Guanyuan nonchalantly said, "It's just that the amount collected is a bit more than before." Yongfu's mind raced like lightning, immediately guessing Wang Guanyuan's intentions. I was wondering why he was so confident, as if he didn't care about Zhang Zhenren at all. So it turns out he's borrowing the Zhongtai sect's name. But from this, it could be seen that even if Zhang Yan was expelled, it would no longer be his turn to be the overseer of the Immortal City. Thinking up to this point, he immediately lost interest. But he still had to give Yongfu face. Putting away the letter, he indifferently said, "In a moment, I'll send someone to deliver it to the Hanyuan sect. What happens next has nothing to do with my Mount Yi sect." Wang Guanyuan smiled deeply and retreated a few steps. Standing there, he said, "Brother Yong, why must you say things in such a way? It won't be too late to discuss it in detail with me in a few days." In the Seven Treasures Pagoda, there was a thumb-sized scorpion spider crawling around on Zhang Yan's table. The insect's entire body was reddish gold, and there were a few circles of faint markings on its carapace. At first glance, it looked like a strange and exquisite copper button. At this moment, the doubts in his heart were resolved. No wonder the scorpion spider was so ferocious, attacking him without caring about the loss of vitality the moment it escaped from the ice plate. Later on, it desperately swallowed the shellfish pearl. So it was all because it wanted to give birth to this young spider. His gaze fell. The mother spider must have given the last bit of spiritual energy it swallowed to the young spider. It was strange that it could still give birth to it after being trapped in the ice plate for thousands of years. Especially the golden red color on its body that was different from normal scorpion spiders. It had never been recorded in the ancient records. Zhang Yan also began to calculate in his heart. It was appropriate for the poisonous insect to nourish the Panchan pill to be a different species, followed by longevity and cultivation. Although the scorpion spider was young, it looked rather extraordinary. If he were to feed it the silk lotus seed from now on, he did not know whether or not the precious pill it produced would be able to satisfy his needs. After thinking for a moment, he decided to give it a try. Although the silk lotus seed was rare, with the Immortal City in his hands, he did not lack a few. However, in order to prevent any accidents, he had no choice but to find more poisonous insects in the future. But just now, the Immortal City had changed hands. He could not easily leave the mountain for the time being. He could only wait a year or two before making plans. During this period of time, he needed to first gather all the easy-to-find medicinal ingredients in the immortal city. Only then could he concentrate on finding those rare treasures. At this moment, a voice came from outside the door. "Manor Head, a messenger from the Mount East sect has arrived. He said that he has an important matter to discuss with Manor Head personally." Because the Mount East sect had the Yuanying Great Elder Yong Fu, Zhang Yan attached more importance to him than the other sections. Seeing that he had come to visit in such a solemn manner as a messenger, he deduced that it must be something important. Thus, he said, "I understand." He took out a jade box and stored the scorpion spider in it, placing it in his sleeve. Then, he floated down from the 7-story pavilion to the lowest floor. After sitting down behind the table, he instructed the boy beside him, "Let him in." The boy held a gong and knocked on the jade chime. After a while, the manor door opened and a young cultivator with a strong figure walked in. When he saw Zhang Yan, he bowed and said, "Bai Jiaying, disciple of the Mount East sect, greets Manor Head." Zhang Yan gently raised his hand and smiled. "Martial nephew Bai, you may dispense with the formalities. If fellow Taoist Yong has something to say, a single letter would suffice. There's no need to send martial nephew back and forth." Bai Jiaying straightened up and said in a deep voice, "Teacher was entrusted by someone with an important letter to deliver to Manor Head. Because it's not a trivial matter, I ordered martial nephew to make a trip here." When he finished speaking, he took out a letter covered in gold lacquer. A boy walked over and took the letter, then delivered it to Zhang Yan's table. After Zhang Yan flipped through it, his eyes flashed. "Thank you for your trouble, martial nephew. When you return, please send my regards to fellow Taoist Yong." Bai Jiaying's objective had been achieved. Not wanting to stay any longer, he bowed and turned to leave the hall. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment, then instructed the boy beside him, "Go and summon junior martial brother Chu." The boy obeyed and left. After an hour, Chu Muran hurried over and apologized profusely. "This little brother just now, I was invited by the Changshan sect master to be a guest. I've come late. Please forgive me for making Manor Head wait for so long." Zhang Yan waved his hand, indicating that it was fine. He then handed over the letter and said, "Junior martial brother, take a look." Chu Muran hastily accepted the letter. After reading its contents, his expression changed. Zhang Yan asked, "Has there ever been an upper sect before?" Chu Muran thought about it carefully and nodded. "Yes, there has been. The sects of Mount Shenwu also worship the Zhongtai sect as the upper sect in name. However, because our sects are located in the northern lands, the upper sect has never paid attention to us. As a result, the number of upper sects we receive is very small. I heard that every year, we only receive 100th or 200th of the Immortal City's collection." When Master Shen was still around, he never paid any attention to us. After Master Yong took over, things changed slightly. Because his Dao companion is a disciple of the Zhongtai sect, it became a little more interesting. 100th or 200th, Zhang Yan smiled. "But this letter says that 60% of the collection will be taken. How much will be left?" Chu Muran said doubtfully, "Manor Head, of all places, I suspect that the Emshan sect is behind this." Zhang Yan declined to comment. Instead, he smiled and asked, "If this is really the intention of the Zhongtai sect, what does junior martial brother think we should do?" Chu Muran hesitated for a long time. Sweat slowly seeped out of his forehead. Finally, he lowered his head and said, "Manor Head, the Zhongtai sect is powerful. If this is really the case, then in my opinion, we should just submit." Chapter 634. Zhongtai sect was one of the 5 major sects in the Dongshan continent. 1,000 years ago, there were even 3 Dongtian Taoists in the sect. Even though it was not as powerful as before, it was still very powerful. In Priest Chu's eyes, the Shenwu mountain world was just a small part of the continent. How could it compete with such a big sect? Thus, he felt that if this letter was real, then the only path he could take was to obey. Zhang Yan looked at his panicked expression and shook his head with a smile. Jinren Shin was 100 times better than me in the past, but I don't think Zhongtai sect could do anything to us. Why are you so afraid now, junior brother Chu? When Taoist Chu heard Zhang Yan's words, he realized that Zhang Yan had the intention to compete with him. He immediately turned pale with fright and said, "Manor head, please reconsider. Zhongtai sect is powerful, it's impossible for my sect to compete with them." Zhang Yan smiled and pressed his hand down. "All right, I understand junior brother's intentions." Then he waved his hand. "You can go back first." Priest Chu wanted to persuade him, but since Zhang Yan sent him away, it was not good for him to say anything else. Helplessly, he bowed and left. Zhang Yan thought for a while in the pagoda, then said, Go and invite junior brother Zhao here." After Chu Mu left the pagoda, he returned to the cave residence with a face full of worry. The concubine saw his expression and asked, "Master, what's wrong?" Priest Chu was also annoyed, so he told her the ins and outs of the matter. He then sighed and said, "How can this Zhongtai sect be provoked? However, from what I can see, it seems like the mansion master wants to compete with him. If that is the case, a great disaster will befall our Deep Abyss school." The concubine comforted him, "Master, maybe they purposely used Zhongtai sect's name?" Priest Chu sighed, "I thought about it later. The seal on the letter was indeed from Zhongtai sect. I'm afraid it's not fake." The concubine panicked and said, "But when Jinren Shin was here, nothing happened, right?" Priest Chu shook his head and said, it's different. Teacher Shin was at the 3rd level of Yuanying back then, so the Zhongtai sect naturally didn't dare to act rashly. But Manor Head's cultivation is far from that. Perhaps he still had the courage to resist when he was facing the Mountamay sect, but when he was facing the colossus of the Zhongtai sect, he had completely lost his confidence. He spun a few rounds on the spot. He stopped short. He said, "No, I need to discuss this with junior brother Wen and junior brother Zhao. We must try to persuade the manor head." With a stomp of his foot, he flew out of the cave. He first went to the lower house to look for Zhao Gu. But when they arrived at the latter's cave abode, the disciple said that he had been invited by Sun Tong, the head of the Wui school, to discuss the Tao in his residence. He was afraid that he would not be able to come back in a short period of time. After hesitating for a long time, he decided to look for Taoist Wen to discuss. Taoist Wen was meditating in the cave. Seeing that Chu Muran had come to visit, he said happily, "I heard that senior brother has been running around for the manor head and has been very busy these few days. How did you find the time to visit me?" Chu Muran let out a long sigh. After sitting down, he told him in detail about Wang Guangyuan's letter and Zhang Yan's visit. In the end, he said, "Our Hanyuan school is already far better than before. It doesn't matter even if we take a few steps back. Why must we risk the disaster of annihilation and insist on competing with the Zhongtai sect? Let's not talk about other things." If this news were to spread, the disciples who were summoned would definitely be disbanded. After Taoist Wen heard this, he was furious and said, "If the Zhongtai sect wants to come, then let them. Why should I, Wen Liang, be afraid of them? If they have the ability, then go ahead and take this head of mine. As long as my spirit is not destroyed, when I reincarnate, I will still seek trouble with them." Sigh, junior brother Wen, you have such a fiery temper. Chu Muran stomped his feet and complained, "The manor head came from another continent and doesn't know much about the matters of Dongsheng. Why are you so unreasonable? Is the Zhongtai sect something that we can afford to offend? You are trying to drag our Hanyuan school to eternal damnation." Taoist Wen said disdainfully, "Senior brother Chu, you are too spineless. You want our Hanyuan school to be at the mercy of others? I will not allow it." Chu Muran said anxiously, "Zhongtai sect is a superior sect to begin with. There is no harm in paying a little more. Why are all of you so inflexible?" Taoist Wen suddenly stood up and pointed at Taoist Chu, scolding, "Bullshit. What Zhongtai sect? Our Hanyuan school is now a superior sect of Qinsong. why should we care about others? Chu Muran, let me tell you, if you want to drag out an ignoble existence, go ahead and do it like Gao Zhongyuan. No one will stop you. When he finished, he flicked his sleeves and stormed in angrily. Chu Muran's face turned red and white. He knew that he had spoken without thinking and said something he shouldn't have. Suddenly, as if he had lost all his strength, he slumped into the chair. But he didn't know that at this moment, inside the cave, the concubine was affected by his pessimistic mood, and she was a little distracted. When she was fiddling with a fragrant flower, she inadvertently glanced around and saw a lifelike red paper crane on the window lattice. Her beautiful face couldn't help but change slightly, and she said to the maid behind her, "You can leave first." She looked at the paper crane with a complicated gaze and took it with trembling hands. She opened it and took a glance before closing it tightly again. She frowned and paced back and forth in the room, sitting up and standing up a few times. In the end, she bit her lips and went back to the inner room to take out a passage talisman and a flying artifact shaped like a lotus flower. She put them in the pouch and then went outside to take care of the maidservant, saying, "If master comes back, tell him that I'm bored in the residence and have to go out for a few rounds." The maidservant only said, "Madam, please come back early. I'm afraid master will be worried if you're late." The concubine said unhappily, "There's no need for you to be so nosy." She threw the artifact on the ground and stepped on it. She chanted a spell in her heart and in an instant, she soared into the sky and flew out of the mountain. Now that the Deep Caves sect had opened up 100 miles of land, the sect was not as narrow as before. After she left the mountain, she still had to walk for a while before she could leave the mountain. Even though she had Chu Muran's talisman in her hand, she was still extremely careful. She managed to avoid the patrolling disciples every time she ran into them. More than 2 hours later, she exited the boundary of Cold Abyss and headed west to a maple forest. After circling around a few times, she saw a young cultivator standing on top of a tree under the bright moon. She also pressed down on her magic tool and slowly descended. She said coldly, "Gao Zhongyuan, didn't you leave? Why are you looking for me again?" Gao Zhongyuan chuckled and said, "Xinyang, after following that good-for-nothing Chu Muran, you've become quite arrogant. Have you forgotten what you've done for me? You." Xinyang was slightly flustered and said, "You said that after I've done that for you, you'll never disturb me again." Gao Zhongyuan blushed and said, "That was then and this is now. If you believe me, it only means that you're stupid. Moreover, it wasn't easy for me to plant you as a hidden chess piece. Of course, you'll be put to good use." Xinyang begged, "I just want to live a peaceful life. Junior apprentice brother Gao, please let me go." "Peaceful life?" Gao Zhongyuan scoffed and said, "The Deep Caves sect is going to be annihilated soon. How can you live a peaceful life?" Xinyang shook her head in panic and said with a trembling voice, "It won't happen. With Jinren Zhang here, and he's Jinren Shin's apprentice nephew, how could anything happen to the Deep Cave sect?" It won't happen, Jinren Zhang." Gao Zhongyuan said sarcastically, "I'm not afraid to tell you that my teacher is on Mountie now. I also have eldest uncle Chu Changji who will be arriving soon. We're going to take over the Celestial City. I'm afraid that Daoist Zhang won't be able to protect himself. By then, it's still uncertain who the Deep Cave sect will be." Xinyang's face turned pale and said, What do you want me to do?" Gao Zhongyuan smiled and said, "That's right. Listen, it's very simple. Chu Muran has a treasure left behind by Shen Baishuang. Its power is extraordinary. I want you to steal it so that Daoist Zhang won't be able to use it." Xinyang's face was filled with fear and she said anxiously, "Master, that treasure is kept by you. How can I get it?" Gao Zhongyuan looked at her deeply and said leisurely, "I know you have a way." After he finished speaking, he laughed loudly and didn't pay any more attention to the woman. He turned into a wisp of smoke and flew into the sky. After Zhao Gu returned to the sect from Sui school, he heard that Zhang Yan had summoned him. He did not bother to tidy up his clothes and rushed to greet him. When he reached the peak, he saw Zhang Yan standing at the edge of the cliff with his hands behind his back. He carefully went forward and bowed, "Greetings, headmaster." Zhang Yan turned around and smiled, "Junior apprentice brother Zhao, don't be so reserved. I summoned you here to ask you about something. You've been to Chu recently. Do you know anything about the changes?" Zhao Gu thought for a while and said hesitantly, "There's something big, but I'm not sure if it counts." Zhang Yan said, "Tell me about it." Zhao Gu sorted out his thoughts and replied, "This matter has been going on for a long time. Further east from the state of Chu is the state of Grand Qi. Both states are roughly the same in terms of territory. However, over 100 years ago, because of a small matter, a disagreement arose between the two states. Both sides repeatedly waged war against each other. I heard that both sides suffered heavy casualties. When I returned to the state of Chu, I heard that the two states were fighting again. Qi was where the other big sect, Xianyu sect, was located. The war between the two countries was actually a battle between Zhongtai sect and Xianyu sect. Zhang Yan thought to himself, this Xianyu cult can fight evenly with Zhongtai Pai, so their strengths must be similar. If that's the case, why does Zhongtai Pai still have time to meddle in the affairs of the northern part of Shenwu Mountain? There must be more to this. At this moment, Zhang Boyan walked in from outside. Zhang Yan raised his head and looked at him with an inquiring gaze. Zhang Boyan immediately used telepathy to say a few words. A frightening light flashed in Zhang Yan's eyes. He first took a few steps, then pointed to a bell pavilion not far away and said, "Younger martial brother Zhao, go and ring that bronze bell." Zhao Gu was stunned for a moment, then immediately replied, "Yes." He bowed and went to the bell pavilion. There was a bronze bell placed there that was as tall as two people. He stepped forward and pushed the long wood. Not long after, the distant sound of the bell could be heard throughout the mountain. When this bell was rung, it meant that the headmaster of the house was summoning the disciples. As long as the disciples heard the news, they must come to the main hall within a quarter of an hour. If there was any delay, they would be punished according to the rules of the house. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Younger martial brother, I will go out for a while." Zhao Gu was puzzled and asked, "Isn't the headmaster summoning the disciples? Where are you going?" Zhang Yan nonchalantly said, "I heard that a disciple of Hanyuan school who betrayed the school is in Emshin sect. Wait for me to retrieve this person's head. It won't be too late to meet the disciples then." Chapter 635. After returning from Vermilion Peak, Gao Zhongyuan went to Jade Gown Peak to see his master, Wang Guangyuan. Although Jade Gown Peak was under the control of the Mountamei sect, it was still 50 li away from the main gate. However, because of its beautiful scenery and many magnificent palaces, it was often used to entertain guests. After Gao Zhongyuan had his token examined by the disciple guarding the mountain, he went straight to the brightly lit palace on the mountain peak. Before he arrived, he heard the sound of decadent dance music and couldn't help but curl the corner of his mouth. Not long after, he arrived at the door of the palace. After stepping inside, he saw his master sitting on a couch, surrounded by several beautiful maids in colorful clothes. They were drinking wine and making merry. He looked like a wanton debauchee. He looked like a Taoist cultivator. There was a hint of disdain in the depths of his eyes. He didn't step forward to greet them. Instead, he minded his own business and sat down at a nearby table. He picked up a jade pot and poured himself a drink. Wang Guangyuan squinted his eyes and suddenly laughed. He patted one of the maid's round buttocks and said, "Go, give my disciple a toast." The woman giggled and said in a sweet voice, "Yes." Her soft body moved slightly. Before she reached him, a fragrant wind assaulted him. Gao Zhongyuan's expression turned cold. He said with disgust, "Stay away from me." He waved his sleeve, creating a gust of wind that threw the woman to the ground. Gao Zhongyuan didn't get angry at his behavior. He laughed and said, "Disciple, do you not like this woman?" "That's true. In a remote place like Yong Mountain sect, there are only ordinary women. I'm afraid they won't enter your eyes. Finished speaking, he lightly waved his hand. The candles in the hall flickered. The woman didn't even have time to cry out in alarm before there was a sudden sound. She was swept out of the hall and thrown off the mountain peak. Then, as if nothing had happened, he picked up a cup and said to the woman next to him, "Fill it up." In Chu, he often feasted and made merry. It was inevitable that he would be infected with the habits of the secular world's nobles. He didn't care about human life in the slightest. When the other women in the hall saw this, they were so frightened that their beautiful faces paled. The woman pouring wine was even more unbearable. Her hands trembled and a lot of the wine spilled outside. She almost collapsed to the ground. Fortunately, Gao Zhongyuan didn't care much about this. Gao Zhongyuan coughed and said, "Master, your disciple has just returned from Cangzhou Peak." Wang Guangyuan said casually, "What do you think?" Gao Zhongyuan looked to his left and right. Wang Guangyuan frowned. "Scram, all of you." The maids on both sides felt as if they had been pardoned. He hurriedly ran out of the hall. Gao Zhongyuan waited until only the master and disciple were left. Only then did he say, "I was the one who found Chu Mu Ran's concubine, Xan Yang. Now that I have something on him, of course he will listen to me. I stole that magic treasure." Then, he shook his head and said in a rather regretful tone, "It's a pity that it's not Chu Muran who's in charge. Otherwise, with teacher's letter, with his weak character, he would definitely submit. Now that it's Taoist Zhang, things won't be so smooth." Wang Guangyuan didn't mind. "That's fine," he said. "When your martial uncle Chu arrives tomorrow, we'll fight our way to Han Yuan's mountain gate. Let's see if he's stubborn then." He had set his sights on the entire celestial city and had long seen it as something in his pocket. How could a little bit of money satisfy his appetite? Even if Han Yuan's sect was really respectful, he would still find a way to stir up trouble. This time, with senior brother Chu Changji's promise to help, he was very confident and didn't think that anyone could stop him. Gao Zhongyuan nodded and said, "With martial uncle's help, it's in the bag." Wang Guangyuan said proudly, "That Taoist Zhang has also helped me greatly. If Yong Fu was still in charge of the celestial city, it wouldn't be good for me to act so directly. Now, it's perfectly justifiable. When I become the lord of this celestial city, I can avoid the fight between the two sects and wait for the right time to act." He came to seize the immortal city this time. On the surface, it was to take revenge for the enmity of the past, but in reality, there was another reason behind it. Zhong Tai sect and Xian Yu sect had fought a few times previously and both sides suffered heavy casualties. The conflict had reached a point where it couldn't be resolved. Now, Zhong Tai sect was recruiting disciples everywhere. Because Wang Guangyuan's Taoist companion was also a disciple of the sect, if he was still in Chu, he would most likely be involved. Therefore, after much consideration, he decided to temporarily hide in the Shinwu mountain, far away from the land of dispute. Once he had the protection of the celestial city's prohibition, and with his identity as a Yuanying Jinren, Zhong Tai sect wouldn't do anything to him. When the time comes, he could just send a few more offerings and he would be able to erase the negative impact of this matter. At this moment, Gao Zhongyuan said, "After we take down Cangzhou Peak tomorrow, Master, please hand over Chu Mu Ran and Wen Liang to me to deal with." When he was cultivating in the sect, he had already reached the step of dissolving medicine and condensing the pill. However, Taoist Chu took the spirit shell that was supposed to be used to buy the external medicine for condensing the pill for him. He was very dissatisfied with this and thought that Taoist Wen was behind this. Gao Zhongyuan was very vengeful, but he thought that both of them deserved to die. Wang Guangyuan smiled and said, "That's easy. After we take down the Hanyuan sect, how about you become the sect leader?" Gao Zhongyuan said with disdain, "It's just a small place like the Hanyuan sect, how can it accommodate me?" Wang Guangyuan clapped his hands and laughed, "Good. Wang Guangyuan's disciple should have this kind of arrogance." Just as the two of them were talking, Zhang Yan had also arrived in the sky above Jade Pao Peak. Originally, he followed Gao Zhongyuan's breath and came here. He wanted to barge in from the main gate and directly capture Gao Zhongyuan. However, after circling around, he found that the prohibition here was simple and not very strong. After thinking for a while, he decided to use his mana to forcefully break it open. At the same time, he could also intimidate the sects in the Shenwu mountain. With a leap, he entered the sky and sat down, moving his technique. Without any hesitation, his robes fluttered, and the surrounding spiritual chi swirled in the sky under his control, gathering continuously. The golden hand above his head gradually condensed into a shape, and under the support of his mana, it spread wider and wider, until it had the power to support the clouds in the sky. However, after a while, this spiritual vigor could no longer be suppressed, and the mountains within a radius of 10 miles were also shaking. At this moment, Wang Guangyuan suddenly felt something, and his expression turned cold, saying, "This is..." He shook his robes and flew out of the main hall. Looking up into the sky, he saw a tall and handsome Taoist standing in the sky, and the sky within a radius of 100 miles was covered by misty smoke. In the middle of it, there was a huge hand that was thousands of feet long, and its whole body was condensed from yellow smoke. The 5 fingers were complete, and the lines of the palm could be seen clearly. It was enough to show that the mana of the person who used it was vigorous. Gao Zhongyuan came out a step later, and he also saw this shocking scene, and his face turned pale. At this moment, Wang Guangyuan was standing on the top of the mountain, and he could faintly feel the huge pressure coming from the sky. One could imagine how terrifying the mana contained in it was. His face twitched, and he cupped his hands towards the sky, saying, "May I know which Taoist friend has arrived? Please come down and have a chat." Zhang Yan didn't pay any attention to him. At this moment, his mana had already been accumulated to the limit. With a thought, the enormous hand that could hold up the sky flipped downwards. In an instant, a vast amount of mana poured down, and it seemed as if it wanted to crush everything in this place. Wang Guangyuan's expression changed abruptly, and he shouted, "Not good." He grabbed Gao Zhongyuan, and flew out of the mountain with a strong wind. He had only flown 5 or 6 miles away in a panic, and the giant hand had already fallen from the sky. With a rumble, it slapped on the top of the mountain, and the surroundings were shaken. Not only did it disperse the prohibition on the Jade Gown Peak, but it also destroyed the temples and buildings on the peak, and even the peak was reduced by half. The movement here was so big that it also alarmed the various sects in the Divine House Mountain, and they all flew out of the mountain on flying lights. However, for fear of getting into trouble, they did not dare to approach, and only watched from afar. When they saw the giant hand, their faces all changed. Yong Fu also came out of the mountain, and his expression was solemn as he looked at the distant sky. When the black and yellow hand waved, the mana shook the mountains, and even he could feel it. He could not help but feel a chill in his heart, and he thought to himself, what kind of expert came to the mountain, and how can there be such a sound when fighting? At this moment, the eldest disciple by Jiaying came up from behind and said, "Master, it's in the direction of the Jade Gown Peak." Yong Fu frowned and thought for a moment, and suddenly came to a realization. He stamped his feet and said, "Oh no." He leaped forward, and immediately turned into a light rainbow, rushing in that direction. Wang Guangyuan saw the devastation below, and even the appearance of the mountain had changed. Such power made him tremble with fear. Until now, he still had not figured out who he had offended, and he shouted, "Fellow Taoist, I am Wang Guangyuan, and I have no enmity with you in the past, and no grievances between us. Why do you?" Before he finished speaking, he saw that the giant hand lifted again, wrapped in a huge pressure, and swept towards the two of them. How would he dare to take this kind of divine Taoist technique head-on? He quickly shut his mouth and dodged to the side. Fortunately, this giant hand moved very slowly, and although he was in a sorry state, he was not hit. He felt that he was powerless to fight against this person, and wanted to leave. Just as he was thinking whether he should say a few harsh words, he saw that the 5 fingers below him were slowly closing, as if to grasp him in the palm. This shocked him to the point that his soul almost left his body, and he did not have time to say anything more. He looked up to the sky, and fled. Zhang Yan expressionlessly waved his sleeve, and over 10 drops of serene heavy water flew out, and blocked his path. If he did not dodge, he would definitely be hit. Wang Guangyuan also caught a glimpse of the serene heavy water, and saw that it was not very eye-catching, and it came from a few miles away. Even if it was originally very powerful, when he thought about it, it must have been greatly weakened, and this move should only be used to block him. So he snorted, and did not change his original path. He opened up the treasure light that protected his body, and with Gao Zhongyuan under his arm, he rushed forward without the slightest hesitation. In just a blink of an eye, he collided with the 10 drops of serene heavy water. A loud sound was heard in midair, and the treasure light had already cracked, and he fell from the sky. Zhang Yan sneered, and with a wave of his hand, he pulled Gao Zhongyuan, who had also fallen from the clouds, to his front, and threw him at his feet, and said indifferently, "Gao Zhongyuan, you have rebelled against the sect, follow me back to accept the sect's punishment." Gao Zhongyuan had never seen Zhang Yan before, and now that he heard those words, how could he not know who was standing in front of him? His body trembled, and he howled, "It's Priest Zhang, it's Priest Zhang, teacher save me. Teacher save me." Although a few of Wang Guangyuan's bones and tendons were broken, and his internal organs were also shaken to the point of dislocation, but because Zhang Yan did not make a killing move, he managed to stop the strong wind after falling for several feet, and clamored, "If you dare to harm my disciple's life, my Hui Xian old ancestor sect will definitely not let you go." Zhang Yan smiled faintly, and said, "You took in a disciple who betrayed my sect as your disciple, and this was unreasonable first. Today I am only giving you a light punishment. If you are not convinced, feel free to gather your men, and come to Han Yuan sect to look for me." After speaking, he flicked his sleeve, and floated towards the clouds. Chapter 636. P.S. My neck has been sprained these past 2 days, so I've been writing much slower. On Cangzhou Peak, Chu Mu ran and Daoist Wen's hearts shook when they heard the bell ringing outside. Wang Guangyuan's letter had just been sent up the mountain, but the sect was summoning its disciples at this time. There was something unusual about this. The two didn't care about anything else and flew out of their caves. One rode on a smoke and flew up the mountain. In a flash they arrived at the great hall halfway up the mountain and landed on the empty ground in front of the hall. Priest Wen hurriedly strode in and saw Zhao Gu sitting alone in the hall. He was surprised and shouted to him, "Shidi, do you know why the bell was rung? Did something happen in the sect?" Chu Mu Ran also came in. He looked at Zhao Gu nervously, afraid that he would hear some bad news. Zhao Gu stood up and bowed, "I was the one who rung the bell." Daoist Wen was stunned. His eyes lit up and he muttered to himself, "Could it be that the manor head is summoning us to fight Wang Guangyuan?" Zhao Gu shook his head, "I only know the manor head's orders. I don't know anything else." Chu Mu Ran suddenly felt uneasy and scolded, "Junior martial brother, don't talk nonsense. What's the point of us going up to fight the Yuanian cultivators?" He took a step forward and asked, "Junior martial brother Zhao, where is the manor head now?" Zhao Gu answered honestly, "The manor head has left the mountain just now." Chu Mu Ran was surprised. If he was summoning the disciples, why did he leave the sect? At this time, there was a commotion outside the hall. The disciples at the foot of the mountain heard the bell and came up the mountain as well. There used to be only 30 disciples in the Deep Cave sect, but now there were more than 200. Because they were new and uncertain, they were all trying to find out what the gathering was about. Chu Mu Ran walked out of the hall. He looked over and saw a beautiful female disciple standing in the hall. She was the only Mystic Light Realm female disciple in the sect, Jiang Ro. He waved his hand at her and said, "Martial niece Jiang, come here." Jiang Ro bowed and said generously, "Martial uncle, do you have any orders?" Chu Mu Ran said, "Where's your eldest senior martial brother? Where is he?" Jiang Ro said, "Today is eldest senior brother's turn to guard the mountain gate. I can't get away. Chu Muran suddenly understood. Unless it was absolutely necessary, the disciples on duty at the mountain gate were not allowed to leave without permission. He thought for a while and said, "Go and replace him." Daoist Wen also walked out at this moment. "Senior brother, what do you mean by this? Could it be that only your disciple is a disciple of the sect and my disciple isn't?" Chu Muran smiled bitterly and said, "Junior martial brother, I don't have any other intentions. As the eldest disciple of the sect, Xian Chao will discuss the matter later. I have to be there." Daoist Wen scoffed and said in a stiff tone, "Whether to summon him or not, the manor head will decide." "What are you worrying about?" Chu Mulan knew that he was still brooding over what had happened just now. He sighed and said to Jiang Ro, "It's very noisy down there. It's not proper. Go and discipline them." Jiang Ro looked at her master. The latter cursed, "What are you looking at me for? Didn't you hear what your martial uncle said?" Jiang Ro was used to being scolded by Daoist Wen, so she was not afraid. With a calm expression, she bowed to the two again and turned to leave. Although her name had the word Ro in it, she was a forthright person, even more so than some men. Moreover, she had some tricks up her sleeve and her cultivation level was the highest here. Not long after she left, the disciples calmed down and stood in front of the hall. No one dared to make a ruckus anymore. Not too long after, a strong wind suddenly howled in the sky, clouds swirled, and a dazzling ray of light headed straight for the peak. Zhao Gu walked out from the hall, raised his head and said, "The manor head has returned." Chu Muran said loudly, "Disciples, why aren't you greeting the manor head?" More than 200 disciples were awed by the shocking scene when the ray of light flew over. Their hearts were filled with reverence. As soon as he finished speaking, they all knelt on the ground. The ray of light landed in front of the hall. Everyone felt a slight tremor under their feet. Some of the new disciples gathered their courage and looked up secretly. They saw a handsome young Taoist standing there. He was wearing a black robe with big sleeves. His eyes were like lightning and seemed to be emitting divine light. There seemed to be waves of spiritual qi rolling around him. It was a daunting sight. Zhang Yan only took a few minutes to come and go. He glanced at the people in the hall and said, "Are all the disciples here?" Zhao Gu came up and bowed. "Manor head, other than the disciple on duty at the mountain gate, Lin Xianchao, all the 267 disciples are here." Zhang Yan nodded and shook his sleeves. Suddenly, the sound of the tide was heard. Everyone was dazed. At this moment, it seemed like a huge wave had swept over the mountain. Then, they saw a person thrown on the empty ground in front of the hall. He looked dispirited and weak. Chu Muran was shocked when he saw him. "Gao Zhongyuan." He looked up at Zhang Yan and said, "Manor head, this is..." Zhang Yan said in a deep voice, "I heard that he appeared at the foot of the mountain. So, I went to catch him myself." Daoist Wen looked at Gao Zhongyuan coldly. He scoffed and stood up. He cupped his hands and said, "Manor head, Gao Zhongyuan stole the tree and left the mountain without permission. This is not tolerated by the rules of the sect. Sect leader, please issue a decree to behead him as a warning to others." Gao Zhongyuan was startled. He looked around and saw Chu Muran standing at the side. As if he was grasping at a life-saving straw, he said anxiously, Senior brother Chu, please save me for the sake of our past relationship." He was personally guided up the mountain by Chu Muran and was often treated like a nephew. Hearing his plea, Chu Muran couldn't help but feel sorry for him. He also stood up and cupped his hands. "Manor head, although Gao Zhongyuan was wrong in stealing the tree, he has been cultivating in the sect for many years. He has never done anything to harm his fellow disciples. His crime is not worthy of death." Zhang Yan looked at him and said lightly, "Junior brother Chu, do you know that after Gao Zhongyuan broke out of the sect, he became Wang Guanyuan's disciple?" Chu Muran was shocked. He looked at Gao Zhongyuan as if he couldn't believe it. Then, a sour expression appeared on his face. He shook his head and sighed. You can go against the evils of heaven, but you can't escape the evils of your own actions. According to the rules of the Chinsang school, if a disciple broke out of the sect, his crime was not worthy of death. At most, he would be arrested and imprisoned. However, if he secretly joined another sect, he would be betraying his master and ancestors. No matter what, he would not be able to escape death. Priest Wen, on the other hand, was burning with anger. He said to Chu Muran, "Senior brother Chu, is this the good disciple you found for our master?" Chu Muran lowered his head and said nothing. Gao Zhongyuan was shocked when he heard this. Seeing that Priest Chu couldn't save him, he gritted his teeth, turned around, and knelt down. He kowtowed repeatedly and didn't stop even when the blood on his forehead splattered. He said loudly, "Sect master, I was muddle-headed and made a big mistake. That old bastard Wang Guangyuan actually came here with another purpose. I know the inside story, and I also know the old bastard's background. If sect master can spare my life, I am willing to atone for my crimes and tell everything." Zhao Gu didn't say anything until now, but he suddenly said, "When you left, you were only at the mystic light realm, but now you are already at the core formation realm. It should be Wang Guangyuan who helped you form your core, so he should be doing you a favor." "How can you say something like this?" Gao Zhongyuan's expression froze, but he didn't know what to say. Priest Wen cupped his hands at Zhang Yan and said, "Gao Zhongyuan betrayed his master and ancestors. Sect master, please allow me to kill this bastard to uphold the rules of the sect." Zhang Yan said, "Junior Marshal Brother Wen, how should he be punished according to the rules of the sect?" Priest Wen said loudly, "He should be beheaded with a stone axe, and his soul should be nailed into a wind cave. He should be tortured by wind for 100 days. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, "If that's the case, Junior Marshal Brother can execute the punishment for me." Gao Zhongyuan's expression changed drastically. He took 2 steps back and looked around. He seemed to know that he couldn't escape death, so he shouted crazily, "My master Wang Guangyuan, my martial uncle Chu Changji is from Huixian ancestors faction. If you kill me today, you will be buried with me in the future." Once he said this, Priest Chu's expression changed drastically. Priest Wen, however, sneered and said, "No matter how powerful they can't protect you now." He waved his sleeves, and a thick stone axe appeared in the smoke. It hung in the air, and he made a hand sign. The axe fell down with a hum, and it fiercely chopped down on Gao Zhongyuan's head. With a bang, the top of Gao Zhongyuan's head was shattered, and he fell to the ground dead. Priest Chu's mouth opened, he wanted to say something but in the end he didn't. Priest Wen raised his hand again and pulled that strand of primordial spirit over. He took out a talisman from his sleeves and slapped it on it. He then bowed to Zhang Yan, leaped up and flew towards the main hall. He went all the way to the rear hall. There was a big well here, covered with a greenish-gray thick stone slab, and on top of it were hundreds of thick iron chains. He silently recited the incantation, and with a sound, the iron chains unraveled by themselves. He then released a stream of evil smoke, and lifted the stone slab to one side, revealing a bottomless hole. From afar, one could feel a cold wind coming from inside. The coldness penetrated into one's flesh and bones, as if a knife was slicing one's skin. This was the evil yin energy of the mountain. To cultivators, it was no less than a fierce poison. Shen Baishuang used her power to suppress it here, to prevent her disciples from being harmed by it, but it could also be used as a punishment. Priest Wen used his mana to protect his body, and walked to the mouth of the well. He took out a spiritual nail, and poked it into Gao Zhongyuan's primordial spirit, and threw it down. He then covered the stone slab, and used the incantation to seal the iron chains. After he was done, he checked again, and seeing that there were no mistakes, he returned to the front of the hall and said, "Master, Junior Brother has thrown the disciple who betrayed his master into the wind hole. After 100 days, his soul will scatter, and he will no longer exist in this world." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Thank you, Junior Brother." Priest Wen turned around, and said loudly to the 200 disciples below, "This is the fate of those who betray their master. all disciples must bear this in mind. The disciples below were shocked. Not only did Gao Zhongyuan's head was struck by the stone axe, he also had to suffer the pain of 100 days of torture, without a physical body, and when the evil wind blew, it was as if thousands of ants were biting his body. The pain was indescribable, and yet he had the protection of the talisman, and would not die immediately. Such a scene, just thinking about it made one shudder. Chu Muran sighed inwardly. Today, Zhang Yan had killed Gao Zhongyuan in front of all the disciples of the sect. From this moment on, there was no longer any leeway between the Deep Abyss sect and Wang Guangyuan. There was no turning back even if they wanted to. But the worry in his heart was another matter, not to mention the matter of Zhongtai School, just that Hui Xian Elder was not a simple person. If he was angered, how would Deep Abyss School defend against him? Chapter 637. Wang Guangyuan had been severely injured by Zhang Yan and had to recuperate for an entire night before recovering his strength. On the second day, his senior apprentice brother Chu Changji arrived. Yong Fu had heard of this person for a long time. Although he was the head of a sect, he didn't dare to put on airs and personally went out to welcome him. Unexpectedly, Chu Changji had a scholarly appearance and a neat beard. He looked like a teacher and spoke in a humble and courteous manner. He wasn't as violent and aggressive as the rumors made him out to be. If Wang Guangyuan hadn't been by his side, he would have thought that he had mistaken him for someone else. After exchanging some pleasantries, Yong Fu said, "I heard that Daoist Chu has come all the way from the southern frontier. I've prepared a banquet to welcome Daoist Chu." Chu Changji replied, "It is already presumptuous of me to come without notice. How would I dare to disturb Sect Master Yong? I think we should forget about it." Yong Fu thought that Chu Changji was just being polite and tried his best to invite him, but Chu Changji repeatedly declined. After a few tries, Yong Fu confirmed that Chu Changji had no such intentions and finally gave up. He said, "Although Maishanwu Mountain is located in the north of the eastern frontier and is considered a desolate place by the cultivators of the continent, the land is vast and there are many wonderful scenic spots. If Daoist Chu is interested, I can personally accompany you another day and have a good tour." Wang Guangyuan, on the other hand, was a bit impatient. He said, "Daoist Yong, my senior apprentice brother has traveled hundreds of thousands of li to get here. He must be tired. If there's anything, why don't we talk about it tomorrow?" Yong Fu laughed and said, "That's my fault. I've already prepared a quiet courtyard for Daoist Chu. It's a simple and shabby room. I hope Daoist Chu doesn't mind." Chu Changji exchanged a few polite words. Before he left, he suddenly turned around and asked, "I heard that Daoist Chu once fought with Daoist Zhang. Can you tell me the specifics?" Yong Fu was startled and slightly embarrassed. He said, "I'm ashamed. We didn't really fight that day. I know very little about him." Chu Changji could tell that he didn't want to continue on this topic. He smiled and didn't pursue the matter any further. He was led by a Daoist boy to the side courtyard that had been prepared beforehand. When they reached the place and settled down, Wang Guangyuan hurriedly sent the Taoist boy away and said impatiently, "Senior brother, you have to help me. Not only did Taoist Zhang injure me, he even captured my new disciple and chopped him to death with a stone axe." Chu Changji came to the jade couch and sat down cross-legged. "What kind of divine arts and techniques did that Daoist Zhang use when he fought with you? Don't leave anything out. Tell me everything." Yesterday, Wang Guangyuan had been beaten by Zhang Yan to the point where he didn't have the slightest strength to resist. Speaking of it, it was extremely embarrassing. Originally, he wanted to stick gold on his own face, but under Chu Changji's gaze, he didn't know why, but he didn't dare to hide anything and honestly recounted what happened that day. Chu Changji asked a few more things that he didn't pay attention to, even the minor details. Then, he sat there and closed his eyes in deep thought. He didn't come here just to support Wang Guangyuan. Now that the Zhongtai and Xianyu sects were fighting, the south was a place of trouble. Although he liked to fight, he could still judge the situation and wouldn't blindly get involved. It was a good opportunity to avoid it, and this way, his reputation wouldn't be damaged. Moreover, a celestial city was quite attractive to him, and it was worth it for him to make a move. If he could completely control it, he would have a foundation in the future. But from Wang Guangyuan's words, Daoist Zhang wasn't as easy to deal with as he thought. Wang Guangyuan asked carefully, "Senior brother, with your cultivation, do you still fear that Daoist Zhang?" Chu Changji opened his eyes and looked at him, saying, "Before a battle, it's necessary to understand the enemy's strength. This is like looking at a person to cure a disease, you need to prescribe the right medicine, and it's not advisable to be rash." Wang Guangyuan's spirit rose slightly, and he said, "Then senior brother, did you see anything?" Chu Changji didn't hide anything, saying, "I still can't see through this person, I need to think about it at length." Wang Guangyuan heard from Chu Changji that Chu Changji didn't seem to have any intention of making a move immediately, and he couldn't help but feel anxious, saying, "Senior brother, he had borrowed the name of the Zhongtai sect to come here. This was originally an extremely good banner, but he himself had been heavily injured by Zhang Yan, and even his newly accepted disciple had been executed. Such extraordinary humiliation, if he didn't immediately retaliate and just endured it, anyone would be able to see that there was something wrong. At that time, who would take him seriously?" Chu Changji shook his head and smiled, saying, "Junior brother, don't be anxious, I already have an idea, and I will definitely seek justice for you. It's just that the time isn't right now, and it's not convenient for me to say it out loud. Go back first, I still have homework to do today." Wang Guangyuan could only give up, and he left resentfully. After Zhang Yan dealt with Gao Zhongyuan, he meditated as usual, refining Jun Yang's spiritual essence, and paid no attention to the outside world. Many of the rare medicinal ingredients needed to refine by Yue Yingshi had to be obtained as soon as possible, but the Deep Abyss sect couldn't leave him for a moment, so he ordered Zhang Boyan to bring the Black Heart Mountain Immortal City token to other immortal cities to purchase them. Chu Muran was on tenterhooks for several days, but he did not see any signs of activity. Only after he sent someone out to inquire did he find out that Chu Changji had already gone to stay at Mount E sect. However, for some unknown reason, there had been no signs of activity until now. The new disciples of the Deep Abyss sect were mostly from the noble families of Mount Shenwu, so the news of Chu Changji's arrival couldn't be hidden from them. This person had a great reputation, and it seemed that behind him stood Zhongtai sect, so all the sects were anxious. If it was in the past, they might have already called back the disciples they had sent to the Deep Abyss sect, but because Zhang Yan decisively dealt with Gao Zhongyuan, everyone in the sect was intimidated on the spot, so no one dared to make a move. Initially, they thought that Chu Changji would come to them to denounce them, but after dozens of days, the Mount Shenwu remained calm. On this day, Wang Guangyuan couldn't wait any longer, so he ran into the cave and said, "Senior martial brother, if you still don't make a move, I'm afraid no one will take you seriously." Chu Changji, however, was very confident and smiled, "Junior martial brother, you're still too impatient." Wang Guangyuan grumbled, "How can I not be anxious?" "Senior martial brother, what are you planning to do? Can you tell me a little, so that I can have an idea?" Chu Changji pondered for a while, then nodded and said, "It's not difficult to fight with that Daoist Zhang, it's just a letter of challenge. But have you ever thought about what if I'm not his match?" Wang Guangyuan was stunned for a moment, then he reacted and said in disbelief, "How can that be? With senior martial brother's ability, how can you lose to that Daoist Zhang?" Chu Changji glanced at him and said somewhat exasperatedly, "Junior martial brother, to say that you're a frog in a well looking at the sky is an understatement. The world is so big and there are so many capable experts. Let's not talk about Daoist Zhang's background, but have you found out his name? As a fellow Yuanying cultivator, you don't know which sect he's from, nor do you know the treasures and techniques he uses, so how can you say that you can win?" Wang Guangyuan lowered his head and probed, "Then senior martial brother, what do you mean?" Chu Changji said expressionlessly, "If one person can't beat him, then two people, if two people can't beat him, then three people. I don't believe that we can still take care of this person if we contact 3 to 5 other Taoists. Wang Guangyuan was stunned. He said in confusion, if we want to decide who the celestial city belongs to, we have to summon the heads of all the sects in the Mount Shenwu to attend the ceremony. How can we attack him under the watchful eyes of so many people? Chu Changji scolded him, I think you've been hanging out with those nobles for too long that your brain has become dull. Can't you think of a way to lure him out? At this moment, a servant boy walked in and said, Master, the guests from the north are here. Chu Changji's eyes lit up. He stood up and said, invite them in. He then turned his head and said to Wang Guangyuan with a smile, Junior Marshal brother, the bait is here. Not long after, 2 young cultivators in brown robes, one tall and one short, walked in. They were both core formation cultivators, but there was a faint demonic aura around them. Obviously, they were demon cultivators. The corner of Wang Guangyuan's eyes twitched. He immediately thought of the demon tribe that was currently entrenched in the Beima Sea realm. When the person in front saw Chu Changji, he came up and bowed, saying, Is this spiritual master Chu? I am Luo Sun, and this is my clan brother, Luo Yi. We are here on the orders of third uncle. Chu Changji did not look down on them just because they were only core formation cultivators. He invited them to sit down and asked, What message does fellow Taoist Luo have for me? Luo Sun cupped his hands and went straight to the point. My uncle wants to ask, Spiritual Master, does the letter from before still count? Chu Changji's expression turned serious, and he nodded. Of course. As long as I take control of the Divine House Immortal City, everything that your tribe needs will be provided. Luo Sun took half a step forward and looked up with a sharp gaze. Spiritual Master Chu, do you dare to make an oath? Wang Guangyuan jumped up and cursed, Bastard, who do you think you are? How dare you force my senior martial brother to make an oath? Chu Changji, however, waved his hand and gestured for Wang Guangyuan to leave. He said indifferently, It's easy for me to make an oath, but forgive me for being blunt, the 2 of you are not enough. Luo Sun cupped his hands and said, We brothers are not people who don't know what's good for us. At this moment, we have brought third uncle's oath with us. As long as spiritual Master Chu is willing to make the oath, we will immediately hand it over with both hands. Chu Changji was slightly surprised, but he only thought for a moment before saying, Bring it over. Luo Sun did not hesitate and took out a golden box from his sleeve. Immediately, a Taoist boy came over to receive it and place it on the table. Spiritual Master Chu opened the golden box and took out an oath. After looking through it, he frowned and forced out a drop of blood essence from the tip of his finger. He pressed it down heavily, picked it up, and tossed it to Luo Sun. Take it. After Luo Sun took it, he did not look at it too much and put it away in his bag with ease. If this item was up to no good, he would be able to see through it once he returned. Thus, he was very relieved. Now that both sides had the oath, they could be considered as half-allies. Thus, his attitude changed immediately, and a smile appeared on his face. He was not as cold as he was just now. Although the Python tribe had occupied the Beima Ocean domain and conquered an immortal city, that place was already empty. There was nothing left. Moreover, without the immortal city token that was recognized by the 5 major sects, it was impossible to purchase the cultivation items of the major sections. After all, there were countless disciples cultivating in the tribe, and the daily consumption was not a small amount. It was best that someone was willing to take the initiative to ally with them. Before he left, he asked again, Spiritual Master Chu, the sects of the Dongxing continent are currently hostile towards my tribe. If you ally with my tribe, how will you explain to the 5 major sects? Chu Changji smiled deeply and said, That is my tribe's matter. Your tribe does not need to know. With his hundreds of years of connections, it could be said to be a piece of cake for him to do this. Moreover, his teacher, Elder Hui Xian, and the sect leader of the Zhongtai sect were brothers-in-law. With this layer of relationship, who could do anything to him? Chapter 638. There was a stack of letters on Zhang Yan's desk. After flipping through a few of them, his expression turned solemn. For the past month, Chu Changji had been well-behaved and didn't make any moves. However, the kingdoms in the Divine House Mountain were suddenly attacked by demons from the sea. Because most sects in Dongshan continent didn't care about formations, a few of them even had their mountain gates broken. After reading all the letters, he asked Chu, Wen, and Zhao Gu, junior brothers, how much do you know about the demon tribes in the Beima Ocean world? Chu Muran and Daoist Wen shook their heads. Zhao Gu thought for a moment, then stood up and said in a deep voice, I know a little about this matter. This demon tribe came from the outer seas 100 years ago, and drove away the celestial Civ sect that was originally here. I heard that in these years, they have been conquering the various tribes of the outer seas. Under their rule, they have already conquered 173 countries. They are extremely powerful, but they have never come to the Dongshan continent before, so the 5 great sects have turned a blind eye to them. I don't know the reason this time. Chu Muran said, Master, the sect masters are all outside the mountain gate. I beg you to open the gate and let them in to avoid trouble. Daoist Wen disagreed, I don't think so. Who knows if there are spies among the sects? Why don't you order them to hide in the mountain first and come back after the storm blows over? Chu Muran said anxiously, No. As the person in charge of the city, if senior brother doesn't do anything, the people will lose faith. Daoist Wen said sarcastically, Senior brother, have you forgotten how those people treated us that day? Why are you so polite to them? Chu Muran shook his head, Junior brother, you don't know. A few days ago, Chu Changji said that if senior brother can't protect the sects in the mountain, you can ask for his help. He won't refuse. Daoist Wen was stunned and said angrily, I think he must be behind this. Chu Muran didn't agree. Chu Changji is the first disciple of Hui Xian Patriarch, why would he collude with the demon cultivators? That's ridiculous. Zhang Yan smiled and said, Not necessarily. Even if we take down those small sects, what can we take? The only place worth plundering in the Divine House Mountain was the Black Heart Immortal City. Those demons had occupied the North Sea for more than 100 years, so how could they not know? Therefore, there must be another reason behind this. Both Wen and Zhao nodded. Ever since Chu Changji's arrival, they had yet to make a move. It just so happened that this matter had happened not long after he arrived here. They didn't believe that there was no connection between the two. At this moment, a Daoist boy came in from outside the door and said, Sect leader Reverend. Sect Master Yong of the Mount Yi sect is here to pay a visit. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered and he said, Please. Not long after, Yong Fu entered the hall with a horsetail whisk in his hand. He bowed and said, Greetings, Manor Head Zhang. Zhang Yan stood up and returned the greeting, smiling. Fellow Daoist Yong is a rare guest. What can I do for you? Yong Fu's expression was solemn. He said, I do have something important to report. Just now, I received the news that 30 miles away from the sea, there are hundreds of demon cultivators moving the floating soil on boats and using mystic artifacts to absorb spiritual qi. They seem to be trying to fill up the sea and build an island there. They don't come with good intentions. What? Chu, Wen, and Zhao were all shocked. That group of demon cultivators was powerful, but Celestial Civ Sect's immortal city was tens of thousands of miles away. If they attacked from the sea, the mystic artifacts set up on the sea would be alerted and they could prepare in advance. But if they built an island near the sea, wouldn't they be able to enter the Divine House Mountain at any time? What made them even more frightened was this the prelude to a large-scale attack on Dongshan continent? Rumor had it that the Demon Division had a grotto heaven overseeing it. If that was true, the sects of the Divine House Mountain wouldn't be able to handle it. They had to ask Zhongtai sect for help. Zhang Yan smiled and said, It's not that easy to form a spiritual vein near the sea. If it wasn't for the spiritual mountains and clear waters, even with the help of treasures, it would take decades to nurture it. Yong Fu stroked his beard and said, Daoist brother Zhang has seen it clearly. I also think so, but it's not appropriate to keep it here. The mountain is in a state of panic and rumors are spreading everywhere. Many old friends are begging me to speak to the headmaster and see if we can dispel the rumors. Zhang Yan nodded, that's right. This matter must be resolved as soon as possible. Yong Fu was startled. He thought that Zhang Yan would try every possible way to shirk the responsibility. He didn't expect him to agree so readily. Pleased, he said, if that's the case, I'll be able to answer to my old friends. Seeing that Yong Fu had the intention to leave, Zhang Yan said, Headmaster Yong, don't be in such a hurry to leave. I have something to ask of Daoist brother. Yong Fu said, please speak, Daoist brother Zhang. Zhang Yan said, as Daoist brother knows, many Daoist brothers have been destroyed by the demons these past few days and have nowhere to go. Therefore, I would like to ask the Emshin sect to temporarily take them in. After we've repelled the demons, we can rebuild the sect for them. What do you think? Yong Fu hesitated for a moment before agreeing. He then bowed and took his leave. Once Yong Fu left, Daoist Wen anxiously said, Senior brother, this is obviously a trap. You must not go. Zhang Yan smiled and said, since junior brother Wen can see that it's a trap, then it must be. However, as the headmaster of the immortal city, unless I give up my position, I have no choice but to go. After he took control of the immortal city, although the Deep Abyss School could benefit from it, it also had the responsibility to protect the city. The person who set up the trap clearly saw this point. Chu Mu Ran looked worried and suggested, Senior brother, can we slow down a bit and call Jinren back first? The two of them can go together. That way, we'll have a higher chance of success. Zhang Yan smiled and waved his sleeves, saying, no need. It's just a small matter. I'll be back soon. Junior brothers, just guard the sect well. As soon as he finished speaking, the three heard a rumble in their ears. They saw a shocking rainbow fly out from the top floor of the hall, straight into the clouds, and disappear without a trace. 30 miles away from the sea at the northern foot of Mount Shinwu, there were dozens of floating boats that were more than 300 feet long floating on the sea. They were connected by iron chains and golden rings. More than 1,000 strong men were constantly pouring baskets of brown mud into the boats. When the boats were full, they would cut off the chains and let them sink to the bottom of the sea. Wang Guangyuan felt his heart ache when he saw this. He grumbled, these are all high-quality jade mud. It's just for show. Why waste it like this? This jade paste was made by grinding spirit shells into powder, then mixing it into a refined paste. Cultivators could use it to fill up the sea and build islands. If they had a treasure that could gather spiritual energy, they could form spirit veins after a long time. Chu Changji didn't mind and said, if we don't make it more realistic, how can we force that Daoist Zhang to come here? You don't have to be so calculative. It's only about 100,000 spirit shells. Consider it as me owing you one. After we take over the immortal city, I'll make it up to you. At this moment, a light rainbow flew over from the sky. Wang Guangyuan glanced outside the window and said in a low voice, Senior brother, it's that Daoist Zhang. The streak of light descended onto the ship, and a cultivator with disheveled hair and a short-sleeved green robe walked out. He carried a bamboo basket on his back. He was none other than the Daoist surnamed Jiang who fought against Zhang Boyan in Constellation Valley. After he steadied himself, he looked around vigilantly. Then, he went to the largest boat, lifted the jade curtain, and entered the cabin. Stepping into the inner room, he raised his head and saw Chu Changji and Wang Guangyuan sitting in the inner room. His originally tense expression relaxed as he cupped his fists and said in a deep voice, Greetings to the two of you. After I received the letter, I immediately rushed over. I hope I'm not too late. Chu Changji chuckled and stood up to return the greeting. Then, he took Daoist Zhang's hand and said with a sigh, It's not too late. After I sent the letter, I thought that a person like Daoist Jiang might not be able to invite you. Daoist Jiang was instantly flattered. Chu Changji had a great reputation in Dongxing continent. Not only was he a second-layer Yuanying cultivator, he was also the head disciple of Hui Xian Patriarch. He wasn't someone an itinerant cultivator like Daoist Jiang could compare to. Yet, Daoist Jiang was being so polite to him. It was obvious that Daoist Jiang thought highly of him. Daoist Jiang hurriedly said, I don't dare, I don't dare. Since spiritual master Chu has summoned me, how could I not come? Wang Guangyuan didn't stand up and looked at Daoist Jiang with a hint of disdain. After the two of them sat down in the cabin, Daoist Jiang said in a low voice, Do you know who I saw a few days ago? Chu Changji said, Could it be related to that Daoist Jiang? Daoist Jiang nodded and said, That's right. That day, I saw a magic treasure in a celestial city in Chu country. At that time, I didn't have enough spirit shells, so I went to borrow it from a friend I was on good terms with. However, I happened to see Daoist Jiang, who I fought with that day. I asked around and found out that he went southeast. Chu Changji and Wang Guangyuan looked at each other and raised their voices slightly. He said, In that case, we only need to deal with that Daoist Jiang. Daoist Jiang confirmed, I think so. Chu Changji's eyes flickered. He said, This is good news. My original plan was to deal with the two of them. If that Daoist Jiang isn't here, I have a high chance of success. Daoist Jiang asked, How should the two of you deal with this person? In his opinion, Chu Changji had set up such a grand show of force. He wouldn't just go up and attack without any standards. He should have made some ingenious arrangements. Chu Changji smiled and said, Of course, Daoist. Come and take a look. He walked to the window and pointed outside. I heard that Daoren is an expert in escape techniques. I think that Daoist Jiang might have the same method. In order to prevent him from escaping, I set up 64 formation flags within a radius of 50 li. This formation has the effect of slowing down one's movement. Once it's activated, it'll be like a boulder weighing thousands of kilograms on one's body. As long as this person falls into this formation, he'll be at our mercy. The Daoist with the surname Jiang nodded. He was someone who was proficient in escape techniques, but if he were to fall into this formation, he would lose 70% of his ability. Thus, he asked worriedly, How will I be able to move within the formation? Chu Changji laughed and took out a talisman. He stuffed it into Daoist Jiang's hand and said, With this talisman, you'll be able to enter and exit unhindered. Daoist Jiang kept it and calmed down. He asked again, Will Daoist Jiang definitely come here? Chu Changji said, Daoist brother, don't worry. As the person in charge of the celestial city, Daoist Jiang won't ignore our actions. Now that everything is ready, we just need to wait for this person to fall into our trap. Chapter 639. P.S. A few days ago, I sprained my muscles and had a hard time writing. After resting for a few days, I'm finally feeling better. After Chu Changji finished speaking, he glanced at Daoist Jiang, who seemed to be hesitant. Daoist Jiang, do you have any concerns? Daoist Jiang said, I do have some concerns, but I don't know if I should say it. Chu Changji looked over and smiled. It's fine. Now that we're on the same boat, you can't escape, but you can't escape me. If you have anything to say, just say it. Daoist Jiang naturally understood what he meant. He laughed dryly and said, Spiritual Master Chu's arrangements are very appropriate. It should be enough to deal with Daoist Jiang. However, according to what I know, there are many powerful artifacts in the celestial city. If I were him, I would definitely bring them with me just in case. Chu Changji said, Fellow Daoists' words are not without reason. When Yong Fu fought with Daoist Jiang, he did take out a few powerful magic treasures. However, I'm a little puzzled as to why he didn't use them when he fought with Daoist Jiang. Daoist Jiang hurriedly said, I'm not trying to scare you. Daoist Jiang should know that Yong Fu and I are good friends. After a few drinks, he would reveal some information. It's said that there's a powerful artifact in the celestial city that has been passed down since the city was built. It can only be used by the owner. However, once it's used, one's lifespan will be shortened, and one's life will be lost. Perhaps that's why Daoist Yong didn't dare to use it easily. However, if his life is in danger, it's inevitable that Daoist Zhang won't risk his life. Chu Chengji nodded slowly and cupped his hands. I still have to thank you, Daoist Jiang. Daoist Jiang hurriedly returned the gesture. You're too kind, too kind. Chu Chengji smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry, Daoist Jiang. This time, it's not just the three of us. There are a few other helpers, so there's no need to worry. Daoist Jiang was a little surprised. Although there were many Yuanian cultivators in the Dongshan continent, they were all people in charge of a region. Usually, it was extremely difficult to gather a few of them. Especially now that the Zhongtai sect was fighting with the Xianyue sect. The cultivators of the two sects were too busy to leave. As for the other itinerant cultivators, as long as they had the slightest bit of cultivation, they would not leave their sects for fear of being implicated. His sect had received a secret order to capture Demon King and Crocodile. How could Chu Chengji find a helper in such a short time? However, since the other party had said so, he could only choose to believe him. After saying a few more words, he entered the cabin to meditate. About half an hour passed. Chu Chengji's expression suddenly changed, as if he had sensed something. Wang Guangyuan stood up and looked outside. He then looked at Daoist Jiang vaguely and said vaguely, Senior Marshal Brother, someone is coming from the north. Chu Chengji stood up calmly and looked out as well. It was noon and the sun was high in the sky. At the end of the horizon, there were two escape lights overflowing with demonic chi flashing through the air. But after a little closer, the black wind and turbid air that blew over seemed to have a bit of a fishy smell. He couldn't help but frown. This time, he had asked for help from the Python tribe to kill Zhang Yan. This was not only to increase their chances of success, but also to test the sincerity of the other party as an ally. However, the few elders of the Python tribe that he had met were mostly on the path of righteous Qi Dao, while these two people were obviously on the path of evil. It was obvious that they were not from the Luo tribe. He lowered his head and thought for a moment, then said, Junior Marshal Brother, follow me out to welcome them. He turned around and walked out of the cabin. Wang Guangyuan muttered something. It was obvious that he was unwilling, but he had to go out to welcome them. Daoist Jiang thought for a moment and followed him out. The three of them stood still on the deck. Not long after, the two rays of light arrived and landed on the boat one after the other. The black chi that wrapped around the boat shook a few times before dissipating. Two old men walked out. The one in the lead was slightly taller. He was half bald, but there were strands of silver hair on his temples and the back of his head. They were sparse like the whiskers of a carp. His eyes were slightly yellow, and there were large white spots on his cheeks. He was very ugly. The other person was slightly shorter and looked similar to him. Their clothes were also the same. It was obvious that they were brothers. The slightly older person first looked at the two of them, then straightened his body and stood there. He raised his hand as a greeting and said loudly, Which one of you is Spiritual Master Chu? This old man is Yu Jia, and this is my younger brother, Yu Yi. Today, we have come to help under the orders of our tribe's elders. Wang Guangyuan curled his lips in disdain. Just by hearing their names, he knew that they were rogue cultivators with no background. When the Daoist with the surname Jiang saw the two of them, his expression changed slightly. However, he immediately acted as if nothing had happened, but his heart was in turmoil. He didn't expect Chu Chengji to be so bold as to dare collude with the North Sea Demon tribe. The Zhongtai sect had once issued a strict order that all cultivators and citizens of the sect were not allowed to interact with the North Sea Demon tribe without permission. Those who disobeyed would be severely punished. For more than 100 years, those who dared to cross the line were all beheaded without exception. In particular, he was the guest of the sixth prince of Chu. His identity was even more sensitive. If people found out about this, he would most likely lose his life. He was invited here by Chu Changji with all his might. He originally thought that it was because of his family's escape technique, but now that he thought about it, there was probably another purpose. However, it was too late for regret now. He didn't doubt that if he behaved strangely, he would be killed by the two of them immediately. But Chu Changji was clearly a disciple of Hui Xian and had a close relationship with the Zhongtai sect. Why did he do this? Chu Changji walked over and greeted them with a smile. Are you two disciples of Taoist Luo? Yu Jia replied, we brothers were originally cultivators of Seal Fall Island. Third elder didn't abandon us and took us in as guests. Chu Changji's eyes revealed a look of realization. No wonder he had never heard of these two people. After the Python tribe occupied the Beima Sea realm, they took all the scattered demon cultivators in the sea as their subordinates. If they met people with good aptitudes, they would help them cultivate. As a result, their strength had grown a lot. These two brothers should have only become Yuanying in the past 100 years. He was slightly dissatisfied. In comparison, the Luo clan not only had a strong foundation, but they also had divine arts and Dao techniques. These two people didn't meet his expectations, but since they were here, they would still be of help. Thus, he was still polite on the surface. He nodded slightly and moved to the side, saying, fellow Taoists, please. We'll be dealing with that great enemy later, so why don't we discuss some countermeasures together? Yui rolled his eyes and said proudly, with us brothers here, what enemy can't we take down? If spiritual master Chu feels that you can't handle that Taoist Zhang, you can just leave him to us. Why bother discussing? Not only did he think highly of himself, but there was also a hint of mockery in his words. Chu Changji revealed a hint of fierceness, but it only appeared for a moment before it disappeared again. He took out 2 talismans from his sleeve and smiled. That's fine too. I've set up a formation here, so I need these talismans to protect myself. Please keep them well. Formation? The Yu brothers looked at him with disdain. Yu Jia stepped forward and waved his sleeve, keeping the 2 talismans. Then, the 2 of them each grabbed a ball of black smoke from their sleeves and threw it on the ground. The smoke enveloped the 2 of them and flew up to 1,000 feet in the air. They hung there motionlessly, as if they didn't want to be associated with the 3 of them. Chu Changji and the other 2 took a few glances at them before returning to the cabin. After they sat down, Wang Guangyuan slammed the tea table with anger in his eyes. He pointed outside and said, Senior brother, who are these 2? How dare they be so arrogant in front of us? Chu Changji smiled. Don't be angry, junior brother. It's a good thing that they're willing to help. We'll let them take the lead later. He turned to look at Taoist Jiang, who was sitting at the side in a daze. He asked, fellow Taoist, you look pale. Are you feeling unwell? Taoist Jiang seemed to be startled and hurriedly said, I'm fine, I'm fine. Chu Changji looked at him meaningfully and said, it's good that you're fine. We'll need fellow Taoists' help later. At this moment, Wang Guangyuan said darkly, Taoist Jiang, you have to keep that talisman safe. If anything unexpected happens, even we won't be able to help you. Taoist Jiang's heart sank. He was not stupid and immediately guessed that the talisman had been tampered with. He forced a smile and cupped his hands. I'll follow your lead later. Chu Changji no longer paid attention to him and sat cross-legged on the bed. Wang Guangyuan chuckled and closed his eyes as well. Taoist Jiang gritted his teeth. Since the matter had already been dragged into a pit of fire, he could only take it one step at a time. With 5 people against 1, if nothing unexpected happened, victory should be within their grasp. Once they got rid of Taoist Zhang, they would see if there was a chance for them to escape. He waited uneasily for about a quarter of an hour. It was already the end of the afternoon. At this moment, there was the sound of a strong wind blowing in the sky. Chu Changji's body trembled and he said in a low voice, "It's here." The three of them came out of the cabin at the same time and looked forward. They saw a blazing rainbow light coming from the south. As it got closer, the waves on the sea became stronger and stronger. Even the floating boat they were on was shaking violently as if it would capsize at any time. Chu Changji was shocked. This person was still more than 5 kilometers away, but he could already cause such a commotion. How strong was his transcendence energy? He couldn't help but rejoice that he had overestimated his opponent and set up a formation in advance. Otherwise, it would have been troublesome. In just a few breaths' time, the escaping light was already 1,000 feet away. Then, it retracted and suddenly disappeared, revealing a Taoist with an imposing appearance. Above his head were 3 masses of strong clouds, 2 real and 1 fake. The spiritual energy around him was like a tide, fluctuating back and forth, actually forcefully pressing down on the surface of the sea to form a whirlpool. When his eyes swept over like lightning, everyone felt their hearts palpitate. Yu Jia and Yu Yi also seemed to feel the threat of the approaching person. They dispersed the black smoke and descended from the sky, taking the initiative to stand together with the 3 of them. Zhang Yan looked at the dozens of floating boats below. His eyes flashed and he waved his sleeve. A ball of light exploded and scattered towards where the 5 of them were standing. The 5 of them couldn't tell what kind of Taoist technique this was. Out of caution, they didn't face it head-on. Instead, they scattered in all directions. Chu Changji hurriedly looked back and was shocked. He saw the ball of light descend and in an instant, the dozens of floating boats disappeared into thin air at the same time. Chapter 640. As the person in charge of the immortal city of Mount Divine House, Zhang Yan had come to stop the North Sea demon tribe from burying soil near the coast to build a continent. As soon as he arrived, he used the 5 elements escape art to move the dozens of boats elsewhere. It could be said that once this was done, the purpose of this trip had already been mostly accomplished. The next step was to deal with these people. Chu Changji also came to his senses quickly. However, these dozens of boats were bait, so it didn't matter even if they were destroyed. Now that he had lured Zhang Yan into the formation, there was no need to think too much about it. Only Wang Guangyuan almost vomited blood when he saw this. The jade clay in these dozens of boats were all his savings, but now it was unknown where they had been moved. He was afraid that he would never be able to find them again. After Chu Changji pulled a distance away from Zhang Yan, he secretly took out a flag from his sleeve and waved it lightly. The formation hidden in the sea was activated. The spiritual qi around Zhang Yan seemed to be compressed by an invisible force and shrank by half. Seeing that the formation had taken effect, he put away the talismans and shouted, "Fellow Taoists, attack!" Although he shouted loudly, he intentionally slowed down his movements. Although it was rumored that he was very aggressive in Dongxing continent, in reality, he was cautious by nature. Every time he fought someone, he would first figure out the opponent before attacking. If he didn't know the opponent's background, he wouldn't attack rashly unless he was confident. According to Wang Guangyuan's description, Zhang Yan had at least 2 powerful Taoist techniques. He had really racked his brains for this. After thinking about it, he felt that it wasn't appropriate to get close, so he could only attack from a distance with his treasures. Wang Guangyuan had been seriously injured by the heavy netherine water last time, so he was very afraid of Zhang Yan. He was also lagging behind. Only the 2 brothers, Yu Jia and Yu Yi, heard his call and each took out an iron whip. With a howl, they wrapped themselves in a ball of demonic wind and rushed forward. When Chu, Wang, and Jiang saw them, they knew that these 2 people were cultivators of the strength path who relied on their sturdy bodies to charge forward recklessly. Rushing forward to take the lead was exactly what they wanted. Wang Guangyuan spread out his palm, and dozens of frost-colored swords flew into the air. Taoist Jiang summoned a pair of silver flying hooks in the sky. In Chu Changji's hand was a goldstone flying pill that he had meticulously refined. Once this item was sent out, within 1,000 feet, it could easily shatter the protective treasure light. The three of them each took out their magic treasures, waiting for Zhang Yan to reveal a flaw so that they could take advantage of his misfortune. Zhang Yan did not move. If it was Chi Path Cultivator, he was suddenly attacked by an array formation restriction. It would definitely be difficult for them to move forward. If they were attacked by enemies at the same time, their lives would be in danger. However, he had already reached the 4th level of the divine contract. This little bit of power was not enough to restrain him. With a sweep of his gaze, he saw the situation of the 5 people present. Facing the Yu brothers who were charging at him, with a thought, a bright arc of light suddenly leaped up from behind him and circled around him. Suddenly, 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 4, and then it turned into 16 rays of light that swiftly chopped down towards the 2 of them. When Chu Changji saw this, he cried out involuntarily, "Flying swords!" Cold sweat appeared on his back. No matter how much he had overestimated his opponent, he did not think that the other party was actually a sword cultivator. Not to mention that this kind of cultivator's attacks were sharp, his movement techniques were far superior to his peers. He secretly rejoiced in his heart that he had the foresight to set up the array a step earlier. Otherwise, the other party could leave and stay as he pleased. His side would not be able to stop this person at all. On the contrary, if they did not stick together, it was possible that they would be defeated one by one. The Yu brothers also did not expect their opponent to be a sword cultivator. Seeing the sword lights coming straight for their eyes and necks, they roared angrily and withdrew the divine weapons in their hands to protect themselves. However, how could they block all 16 sword lights? In an instant, their shoulders, backs, arms, legs, and other parts of their bodies were all torn open with cuts so deep that their bones could be seen. Their bodies were stained with blood from head to toe. However, to a strength path cultivator, these kinds of injuries were not life-threatening. Instead, it aroused the ferocious nature in their hearts. The 2 of them let out wild roars and their figures only paused for a moment before continuing to charge forward. When they were within 10 feet of Zhang Yan, they shouted in unison and raised the divine weapons in their hands, aiming for Zhang Yan's head with a woo-woo sound. Zhang Yan's expression did not change. He calmly waved his sleeves and a ray of light flashed across. After a flash, the 2 of them actually disappeared from his sight, leaving him alone in the air. Chu Changji and the other 2 were dumbstruck when they saw this scene. Previously, Zhang Yan had caused the dozens of floating boats to disappear. Now, it was the Yu brothers' turn. Because they did not know what kind of Dao technique that was, the 3 of them hesitated for a moment. Zhang Yan ignored them. He only lifted his sleeves and said with a smile, "This place is vast and boundless, fellow Taoist Luo, why haven't you come out yet?" As soon as he finished speaking, his sleeves suddenly shook and a black shadow flew out. With a thud, it went straight into the water. After a moment, a black shadow could be faintly seen emerging from the sea. As it gradually expanded, an indescribable aura gradually spread out. He had never been an arrogant person. Since he had a great helper like Dragon Carp Luo Ren by his side, how could he not make use of it? However, this demon had transformed using transcendence energy and had been sleeping in his sleeves for many years. It would take a while for it to recover to its original state. Therefore, he focused on delaying it. Once it had sealed off this part of the world, he would be able to take care of the 5 of them one by one. Chu Changji instinctively felt that something was wrong and shouted, "Junior brother, fellow Taoist Jiang, quickly make your move." "It's too late." Zhang Yan smiled and pressed his hand against the air. The 16 sword lights paused for a moment before abruptly exploding in all directions. The sword lights were extremely fast and in the blink of an eye, they had already closed in on them. The 3 of them could not be bothered to attack anymore and each of them activated their protective treasured light and transcendent artifacts. However, the sword lights did not retreat and continued to circle around them. Chu Changji was experienced and knowledgeable. He knew that once the wandering sword lights found an opening and slipped in, their lives would be taken in an instant. He was forced to be on full alert and did not dare to be careless. As for Wang Guangyuan and Daoist Jiang, they simply retreated 1,000 feet away. Although they were no longer threatened by the sword lights, they were no longer a threat to Zhang Yan. Chu Changji glanced at the two of them with a slightly dissatisfied look on his face. He had painstakingly laid out the restrictive formation in order to restrict Zhang Yan's movements so that they could attack as they pleased. But if they only knew how to dodge, what was the point? At this moment, the surface of the sea a few miles away suddenly burst open. 2 pillars of water shot up and 2 tall and sturdy figures appeared. Chu Changji turned around and saw that it was the 2 Yu brothers who had reappeared. He couldn't help but feel happy and relaxed at the same time. He thought to himself, just now, that Daoist Zhang is only using a teleportation technique. This is much easier to deal with. If Zhang Yan could subdue the 2 Yuanying cultivators with just a wave of his hand, then there would be no need to fight. It would be better for them to escape as soon as possible. Just now, the 2 Yu brothers hadn't even displayed their abilities when they were teleported into the sea by Zhang Yan. They were seabirds that had turned into spirits and weren't good at swimming. They had choked on a few mouthfuls of seawater and felt stifled in their hearts. At this moment, they rushed forward again, wishing they could smash Zhang Yan's head with a whip. When Zhang Yan saw the 2 of them appear in front of him again, he smiled faintly and waved his sleeves again. The Yu brothers only saw a blur in front of them and knew that something was wrong. They hurriedly tried to dodge, but at this moment, a pressure descended from the sky. Everyone present felt their bodies stiffen as if they had been bound by some great force. They couldn't move at all. Chu Changji exclaimed in shock, "Heaven and earth seal." Zhang Yan turned his gaze. Chu Changji was a second-layer Yuanying cultivator and was the first person he wanted to get rid of. With a flick of his finger, the drop of Xianming heavy water flew through the air and pierced through Chu Changji's head. However, Chu Changji's entire body trembled and actually turned into a ball of spiritual essence that slowly floated away before finally dissipating in the atmosphere. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows in surprise. A clone. The surroundings were sealed by the Heaven and Earth Prohibition Lock technique. Chu Changji thought that if he were to use the Devil Sect's death substitution technique in such a situation, it would be impossible for him to not notice. In that case, perhaps this person had appeared as a clone from the beginning and his real body was probably somewhere else. Since that was the case, he simply ignored him. With a sword gesture in his mind, a sword ray flew 1,000 feet away and the Jiang Daoist's head immediately fell off. Just as he was about to attack the 2 Yu brothers again, Dragon Carprueran suddenly said, "Master, those 2 bird demons are also mutated species and still have some use. Why don't you let me deal with them?" Zhang Yan thought for a moment and nodded. "All right." A wave suddenly rose from the sea and swept the Yu brothers away, disappearing without a trace. At this moment, only Wang Guangyuan was left on the scene. When he saw Zhang Yan looking at him, he was extremely terrified, but he still pretended to be calm. "Fellow Daoist Zhang, I don't have any deep grudges with you. If you let me go this time, I'm willing to offer all my belongings to you and even tell you a few secrets." Zhang Yan smiled faintly. He raised his hand and pointed at him. In an instant, a purple thunderbolt struck down with a loud bang. Wang Guangyuan had only become a nascent soul a few years ago and only had a few defensive magic tools on him. How could he resist such a level of Dao technique? In the blink of an eye, his body exploded and turned into fragments that filled the sky. Zhang Yan looked around and saw that the sea was already empty. He looked down and said, "Fellow Daoist Rueran, there's no water in the mountains. You can swim freely in this North Sea. Why don't you stay here and guard this sea area?" The sea churned and Dragon Carprueran poked her head out and said, "I'll definitely guard this place for Master." On the eastern boundary of the Divine House, in an uninhabited valley. Chu Changji's body trembled slightly and he woke up from his meditation. He wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said with lingering fear, this Taoist Zhang actually had the help of a third Yuanyin cultivator. If I didn't have this mana clone to avoid disaster, I'm afraid I'd also be in trouble. This Dao technique of his was secretly passed down by Hui Xian elder ancestor. He could cultivate a clone that was no different from him. Other than not being able to use divine arts, he could also use treasures and escape techniques. Even if it was broken by others, it wouldn't be a big deal. After cultivating for another year and a half, he could cultivate it again. However, when he used it, his real body couldn't move and had to sit in the cave. If he was disturbed at this time, he would immediately die from the rupture of his meridians. Therefore, even his junior brother Wang Guangyuan didn't know that he knew this divine art. Before the battle, he was already prepared for failure. This time, it would be best if he could get rid of Zhang Yan. If he couldn't, it would be a test. Even if there were losses, it wouldn't be too big. He stood up and smiled bitterly. Even though I know that Taoist Zhang has many tricks up his sleeves, he's not someone to be trifled with. Never mind, I'll first return to the sect and tell teacher about junior brother Wang's death. Let's see what arrangements he has. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.